Hey, it's Shereese, and today we reviewed the very last episode of TNG. We find out that the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future was Q all along. And we ask the question, why can't Picard and Beverly just be happy together? Stick with us. Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea, and today, Shereese, I don't wanna do it.
Well, you know what? You already watched it, so.
That is true.
Let's honor that. Let's honor the struggle, you know?
Yeah.
This was a 90-minute episode or something
and
like that.
And it was a struggle. It was, my friend. Guys, I cannot believe I'm saying this, and I'm probably going to cry a few times. Today, we are breaking down the series finale of Star Trek: The Next Generation, Season 7, Episode 25, sometimes also called Episode 25 and 26, All Good Things. This episode was written by Brannon Braga and Ronald D. Moore and directed by, I finally got a video of somebody saying the name because I've been saying Weinrich Kolb the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It's Winrich Kolb. And I was like, that's a cool sounding name. So I apologize for all these years of saying it wrong, but there it is. Here's All Good Things. I hate this so much. I hate that this is ending. In the series finale, Captain Picard learns from Q that he is to be the cause of annihilation of humanity and begins an incredible journey through time from the present to the past when he first took command of the Enterprise to 25 years into the future.
Bum, bum, bum.
Last one! Okay, what are your initial thoughts on this one?
This is like a really good idea. I really like this idea, especially for a finale, because and this is really part of my final thoughts, was it was so cathartic. But my initial thoughts was that I didn't remember this at all. So all I remembered from this episode was I remember Q and like the trial on humanity has never ended. I remember that. I remember there was some time jumping, but I don't remember why. I remember Beverly and Picard were divorced, which I thought was such a ripoff because we never got to see them be happy together.
Stupid. I know.
Those are the three things and the only three things I recalled from All Good Things. I've only seen this episode / these two episodes probably maybe twice, like 2 or 3 times. Like I saw it once when it aired. I saw it once on the rewatch, and maybe that's it. Because when I get to season 7, I usually stop watching after Firstborn.
Right back to season 3.
yeah. I stop watching after the episode when Alexander comes back from the future. And then I go back to the very end of season 1 to like Symbiosis, which is like the third to last episode or whatever. Yep. And then I just, keep it pushing. So this was
and you know what?
A bonus episode for me.
That episode where Alexander comes back, that's a good enough place to end things for me. Seriously. Like, perfectly cromulent place to end things, to quote Bart Simpson. Like, it's perfectly good. You don't need all this, but it was quite cathartic. My initial thoughts on this were, no, please, no. And here's why. Because it's the end of one of my most beloved TV shows ever, so I don't like that. But also, I don't remember the episode itself being that great. Like, I do remember the Beverly Picard divorce. I remember the Ironic syndrome. I remember the spatial anomaly being like bigger in the past than in the future, which I always was like, that's dumb. Like, doesn't make any sense. But that's kind of it. Yeah, like the trial of humanity stuff. But all of the other parts, I don't really remember. But also, as it turns out, doesn't really matter because those were it. That was like the big.
That's part. That's pretty much the show. That's the episode.
That's the whole episode. I have a chunk of trivia about this, which I'm just going to give off the top. There were early versions of this story that included the Borg attack at Wolf 359 as a fourth main timeline, which I thought would have actually been really cool because it is such a keystone moment in Picard's life because he was Locutus. He was not in control of himself. The Borg had him. He was, he lives for the Federation and he cost Federation members their lives, stuff like that. According to Brannon Braga, who was the co-writer of this episode, Hugh would have appeared as well, helping to rescue Picard from the Borg in that timeline, which I was like, that's kind of cool, but I think the show would have probably started to feel really crowded. The story also originated from a pitch by Ronald D. Moore early in the season where Q's gone insane, causing the universe to come unraveled, and the other characters found themselves in bizarre places, like with Q as a homeless guy sitting on a corner next to a garbage can muttering, I used to be a super being, which I'm like, I'm really glad they didn't go that direction. And although Michael Piller did not want to do that particular story, he did like the idea of bringing Q back and using him to bookend the series, which I thought was actually really smart because he was the one who kind of kicked off the series. And I love the ending. And I love that they brought back Denise Crosby.
Yeah, that was really sweet. And we don't need to have Wesley back because we got to see him a few episodes ago in a really stupid episode, but we did get to see him. So we did kind of get our farewell to Wesley, and we know he's off doing bigger and better things in the world. And so to see Yar come back was really nice. Yeah. And I think, having
there's no way to like de-age Wesley either to make him look like 14 again. You know what I mean? Like
he would
Denise
have
Crosby
to be
looked almost the same she did in season 1. So it's like,
it'd have to be present Wesley, but we already like talked about what happened to him in the present. So it'd be kind of weird. But I love that they bookended with Q because Encounter at Farpoint, we were just talking off mic, is not our favorite episode. It's just so dumb. But Q did start it all. So it's nice to have Q in the finale again. That was nice. I do think 4 timelines would have been too many timelines because we also mentioned this off mic that taking notes in this episode was extremely challenging because there was so much jumping around with timelines, and it would have been easier just to just watch it and just enjoy it than really trying to go beat by beat. So if there was a 4th timeline, I don't even know what I would do with myself. That'd be too many things. But I do think bringing back in the Borg would have been super interesting. But even without it, I think this idea is interesting. Something with past, present, future, and we get to see kind of the scope of Picard's life and the lives of his friends. So I think that was really, really interesting and a great idea for a finale, because to me, it felt like, and this again is a little bit of my final thoughts, but it felt like the episode ended, but it didn't. It ended on a ... on an ellipsis, which I appreciate, because I don't feel like it's the end of the Enterprise. They're not doing anything after this. It's like, no, they just go on about their adventures and go on doing what they do.
Continue. Yeah.
So I like that it didn't end, but I also like that it didn't make me go but what happens next? It wasn't a cliffhanger. I don't have to know what they do tomorrow.
Yeah. You're right. Because if it would have ended with preemptive strike, which was last week's, I believe, with Ro taking off, it would have been a very unceremonious ending, where this felt special. It felt momentous and more important. Like, he's bouncing back and forth. Q is making it happen. There is a lot at stake. Like, literally everything is at stake. Like, humanity's existence is at stake. This is the most stakes you could put on a person, right?
Yes.
Or on a situation. And of course, in the end, he figures it out. The team solves it, and they can continue. So it's like, you passed the final test and you are allowed to continue going on your adventures. And that, you're right. I guess I do like it for that. I just really hate that it's over, but let's just jump right in. So Worf and Troy are coming out of the holodeck after what was obviously a cute little date. And as they're walking back to her quarters, Worf wants to discuss Riker, and he wants to be respectful with Riker and the past that she has with him. And I do appreciate that about Worf, because he's Mr. Honor, right? And he really respects Commander Riker and loves him as a peer, right? And everything they've been through. So he's like, I really do want to focus on I just want to be respectful and let him know these are my intentions. And I love that Deanna is like, why don't we think about our feelings first? And as they go to kiss, Captain Picard, in his bathrobe featuring the deep V-neck, comes off the turbo lift, and he's like, "Counselor, what day is this?" It felt very Christmas Carol. Like, what year is it?
That bathrobe is both comfortable and cold at the same time.
It would never work for you because you're always a cold person.
Never work for me.
Yeah, but I also have friends that are perpetually too hot in any situation they're in, so that would be perfect for them. Also, did you notice that he ran to Troy to ask her what year it is or what star date it is or whatever? He also passed 2 people in the hallway.
I sure did notice that. I sure did notice that. And then
asked anyone, you could have asked the computer.
And then, by the way, at the end of the episode, when it comes right back to this exact same scene, he's getting out of the turbo lift. So I'm like, wait a minute. So he went on a journey to go and ask Troy specifically?
He absolutely did.
He could have asked the computer. He could have asked, let's say he just woke up in the turbo lift in his robe. He could have asked the computer in the turbo lift. When the doors open, he could have asked the first person he came across, "Hey, young man, what day is it? It's Christmas Eve." He could have done that. But 100%. He goes running right at the point when they're about to kiss and is like, wait, before you do that, what's today? Okay. Just making sure. Right? As you were. It's just but he didn't do as you were. He goes, okay, well, in that case, I need to talk to you right now.
Yes, because he says, I don't know how to explain this, but I'm moving back and forth through time. Credits. And usually I skip the credits because they're long and I'm like, I've got notes to write. But because it's the last episode, I watched the credits, and I will tell you this. While watching the credits, I thought back about how much my life has changed since we started doing this podcast, and like where I started and where I am now. And it really did make me be like, wow, I can't believe we started this podcast like 3.5 years ago.
At the time of this recording.
Yes, at the time of this recording. I'm like, how did we get here? And my life has changed in a million ways and stayed the same in a million others. But I used that time to be like, dang, like it was crazy. So I appreciated it. I appreciated the whole credits.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I skipped it like I always do. I'm like, and I actually wait for the little skip button to come up. So I'm like, come on. Boom. Because sometimes they take too many seconds what I do. For it to pop up. And I'm like, buddy, because I know this is long too. And I'm going to be like fast forward too far just to get over it.
Now, back from credits, we're in Troy's quarters. Picard says he feels like he's waking from a nightmare. Like the details are kind of slipping away really quickly, which thank goodness that element sort of goes away, because otherwise it'd be too hard for him to keep the story straight. But he kind of got the sense that it was like sometime before he took command of the Enterprise. And then he was also an old man, like doing something with his hands. And Troy's like, could this have been a strong dream? And he's like, no, it was way more real than a dream. And at this point, after going through everything they've gone through as a team, I'd be like, all right, let's get a level 1 diagnostic running on this bad boy.
Let's just start scanning everything.
Yep.
Just scan
because it doesn't cost anything to scan. Just scan everything at all times. Keep the scan running all 7 seasons.
It doesn't cost anything. That's what the ship's doing anyways. Yeah. But she, as a very Troy thing to do, is sitting and listening to him like, okay, let me hear all your concerns. Let me hear the whole story before I make a judgment, which is the right thing to do. And as he's talking, boom, suddenly he's back at Chateau Picard, which is where I'm guessing he's at, since we don't really get a total like rundown of where he's at, but that's the only place that makes sense. And he's like, he's not picking grapes from the vineyard, but he's like tying the vines.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. And we find out that he was an ambassador. He's now retired. So this is like way, way in the future. And Geordi shows up and he is no longer wearing his visor, but instead he's wearing some really cool contacts.
Yeah.
So we're like okay.
Mechanical contacts. Super cool.
So again, we're like, okay, clearly this is the future. Like no visor equals future for Geordi. Otherwise you can't tell because he hasn't aged. So otherwise you cannot tell time has passed.
He does have a really bad mustache on. And I was like, no, Geordi, no, not the mustache. I hate a plain mustache. It feels very 1970s cop / sexual predator. So I'm always like, like just a mustache.
If only sexual predators had like a uniform and like, just like a style where we could just identify from a distance. There he is. Right? There he is. Like that would make law enforcement so much easier.
It sure would.
So the thing that I thought was interesting about this scene with them both having aged is it totally reminded me of the last scene in Harry Potter, in the last Harry Potter movie, where they're like 20 years older.
Yeah.
And how at the time of this recording, the 20th anniversary of that movie coming out has already passed.
Yeah.
And so they
Harry
did.
Potter. Yeah.
So they did come back 20 years later to be like, oh, so good to see you again, whatever. And they look amazing. And they
all look so much better than the aged up
yes. And that's what they said. They were like, oh my gosh, we're so glad that 20 years later we look better than we did in the movie of what they thought we would look like 20 years later. Right. And I thought the same thing here. I was like, wow, looking at how they all look in their prediction of what these people are going to look like 25 years later, and knowing that we have just seen them in Picard season 3 not too long ago, they all look way better in real life than they did in these projections. Every last one of them looks amazing. So anywho, that's what I thought of here. I was like, wow, these actors age so much better than they look in this episode. So Geordi's talking about his family and, Picard's asking questions, and he married a woman named Leah. And I was like,
who's the director of the Daystrom Institute? And I was like,
is this Miss Brahms? Did she get divorced from her ex-hubby and like hook up with? Well, anywho, so that's what happened. And then he has 3 kids, Brett, Alondra, and Sydney. So of course I Googled it because this whole crew shows up in Picard season 3 and we get a Where Are They Now? So I'm like, didn't he have 2 daughters in that? And so I Googled it and he had 2 daughters in Picard named Alondra and Sydney. So they
did
out of
keep here.
That. They did keep that.
Oh my God, I love that.
And so many things from this episode showed up again in Picard that it helped me know that this is
writers.
This is literally the only episode they watched before they started writing that show. Let me tell you, there were so many inconsistencies, but this episode, clearly they watched and studied this episode before they started Picard.
I'm so glad to hear that, because in Picard season 1, he has a vineyard in Bordeaux, France. It's Chateau Picard. There is a real wine called Chateau Picard that you can buy. And I was like, ooh, maybe I'll treat myself to, like, I'm not really a big wine person, but I also like won't say no to wine. I'm a cocktails person myself, but if somebody gives me a glass of wine, I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, maybe, you know, like ending this whole podcast, like I'll treat myself. Girl, it's $60 a bottle. I was like, I'm good. I'm super good.
Is that a lot or a little bit for wine?
That is a lot for wine. Because you could
okay.
go to Trader Joe's and get a perfectly lovely bottle of wine for like $8. So I was like, okay, yeah, all right. I'm going to just go ahead and wait on that one. Because no thanks. Also, I love the way that Geordi calls to the captain when he shows up at the vineyard. Captain Picard to the bridge. We've got a problem with the warp core, the phase inducers, or some other damn thing. And I was like, oh, Geordi.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
We love you so much, Geordi. Fangirls. Picard has been diagnosed with a neurodegenerative disease called Irmotic syndrome,
which he also has in Picard season 1. So
yes, he
does.
Did.
Like I said, they actually watched this one, and I'm pretty sure only this one episode before building Picard. So there's like a lot of time. So if you haven't seen Picard yet,
who?
right. So if you haven't seen Picard yet, definitely give it a watch after this to get some "Where Are They Now" vibes.
Yes.
But this is our first time finding this out. And it's super sad, you know, and Geordi's like, you know, and Picard's kind of like, I'm not an invalid. Like, you didn't have to rush to my bedside. Like, I'm not dying on my bedside or whatever.
Yeah.
And Geordi's like, well, I just, you know, I heard the news and I wanted to come see you. So it's really just very sweet.
It is. And as they're walking through this vineyard, which Irmotic syndrome, he's just been diagnosed with, it's going to be 25 years before he dies of this or whatever, right? Like, according to this, like, disease. And Picard's like, how did you know? And he's like, man, you know, got some friends in Starfleet Medical. He's like, I'm fucking Geordi. I'm Geordi, dude.
Yeah.
I know everybody and everywhere,
knows.
right?
Everybody knows.
Came
Plus
from Rigel
Picard.
Yeah. And he goes, well, I was in the neighborhood. And Picard's like, no one just comes to Earth from Rigel 3 because you're in the neighborhood. And I was like, yeah. So as they're walking through the vineyard, Picard sees some like angry villagers, and they look just like the peanut gallery from the Trial of Humanity from Encounter at Farpoint. They're like screaming and shaking their broken fans at him and stuff. And suddenly, boom, it's 30
for some reason, in this scene, Picard's like, can't you see them, Geordi? They're all laughing at me. And I was like, they don't seem like they're laughing to me. They seem like they're
yelling at you.
And they're like, one guy's like taking off his hat like he wants to throw it, but I guess he doesn't want to lose the prop. So he like pretends to throw it and puts it back on his head. Yeah. I was like, okay. But it doesn't look like they're having a good time. So in any case, yes, then we're back in time. Then we go, and now we're back in time.
Back to, it's 32 years in the past. It's the day that Picard is about to take command of the Enterprise. So I guess from the present, they go like 25 years in the future and like 7 years in the past or whatever. And Tasha Yar is right in the middle of asking him whether he's ever been on a Galaxy class starship. And I was like, oh my God, it is so lovely to see Denise Crosby, number one, back. She's come back a few times.
But this is really, This is her. This is original Yar right here.
This is original Yar.
In original garb. Did you notice the old uniform?
That was one
so helpful for figuring out the timeline. For me.
It really was. I'm so glad that they like made that costume change. One, because it just looks better, but two, so we know where everybody is. Also, this is the only season finale that Tasha Yar is on for TNG. The only one, which I was like, oh, because like she died. The only
The
only
she died in
finale for
season 1.
Episode 22, and there were 26 episodes. So they talk about what the Enterprise is like, and it's this funny moment where Tasha goes, and there she is, as if we've like rounded the corner and could just see her for the first time. Did you notice?
As we couldn't see her for the last 3 light years. We couldn't see her.
Yeah, that's what I said. I was like, they've been able to see her for the last 300,000 kilometers. It takes up all of the windows of the shuttle. It's not even the view screen. It's like the front view screen and the side windows. And I love that she's like, and there she is. Bum, 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 bum. I was like, girl, we're like practically scraping the belly of the beast right now. Anyway.
But let me tell you though, okay, so there's this video game called Star Trek Bridge Crew, and that's how the game starts. The game starts with you in a shuttle going around the Enterprise, just like in this scene. And it's glorious. I play it on my VR headset. So it's like you feel like you're in the like you're looking around. You can see the L cars and the panels in the shuttle. And when you look up to the view screen, you see the entire Enterprise, or whatever that ship is supposed to be. I'm assuming it's supposed to be the Enterprise. And the shuttle actually like goes around the ship, and it's glorious. Every time I play it, it takes my breath away. But the first time I played it, I was like, oh my gosh. Like I was just in nerdvana, let me tell you, being able to be in a shuttle, looking at this beautiful starship. But in any case, so I wrote in my notes, glorious. Next thing you know, we're in Troy's quarters, and Picard is telling Troy that he was just with Tasha, and it's a very like solemn moment because when he was past Picard, he was staring at Tasha, and she was like, "Did I do something wrong?" And he was like, "No, you just remind me of someone." So you're kind of like, is he remembering or not remembering? Because he talked about how his memory is he's a little disoriented and confused, and then everything comes rushing back to him.
Right. So it's like in this moment, you're like, do you know what present Picard knows? And you're just like marveling at seeing Tasha, or are you in past Picard's mind thinking this is just the moment and you just seem familiar? Yeah. It's still like not super clear.
Yeah. So next thing you know, we're in sickbay. And now Beverly's doing all the scans, like the infinite number of scans that we need to do in this situation. And Troy is saying like, well, did you check for temporal displacement? Which again, I was like, okay. Somebody took their officer's test. You know, she's not just in there going,
Officer Troy.
She's not just in there going like, I don't know. How do you feel about it? You know, she's like, she's being like, okay, something's going on with Picard. If it's not neurological, if it's not something we can scan, maybe it's something temporal, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I mean, they're going into action mode, which is why we love this crew. We see pregnant Lieutenant Ogawa coming in and rubbing her belly, and saying that according to their records, Picard hasn't left the ship at any moment, so he's experiencing traveling through time, but his body's not going anywhere, and his mind seems to be okay. But so what's going on? Like, what is really going on? At no point did they just not believe him in the present, which is really amazing because it's crazy. Like, I mean, the thought itself is like, they've seen crazier. So it's actually not that wild. But the fact that they're doing all the scans and they're like, no, he hasn't left. Like, he for sure has not left. Then it's like, well, what could be going on? And then Beverly has a private word with Picard. And because he had asked about the Irmatic syndrome and stuff like that. And she's like, you do not have it. However, you do have this small neurological defect, which could potentially lead to a bunch of other defects in the future. But what are the chances of that? We have no idea. And Picard's like, well, then why do you look like, you know, your puppy just died? Why are you looking at me like that? You know, and she's like, well, just because even though she's saying probably nothing will happen, at the same time, she's like, well, you saw your future and you know that it happens. So she's trying to reconcile in her mind of like, well, if he is jumping through the future, which we're all just assuming he is, he knows what's going to happen. And even though I haven't found evidence of that, I found evidence that could happen. And just the thought of it, you know, it's really upsetting, which is totally understandable.
Yeah. Now, while this is happening, an admiral calls Picard for a fleet-wide yellow alert. The Romulans are fucking around again in the neutral zone, okay?
As they are wont to do. Yes. I love that we get to see Admiral Nakamura again because we haven't seen him since Hutch's little dinner party was the last time we saw him. Since something that Picard didn't want to go to, and they kept trying to fix the warp, fix the ship so they can get to that party or whatever.
Right. And the ship was like, Picard was like, I'm so sorry, but the ship is actually acting up and we actually can't get there. And he's like, well, we'll move it and reschedule it and reschedule. And he's like, but I can't get there.
We'll get like a ship to come tow you, to like drag you out. And he was like, no, I assure you, the ship will be fine in another hour or two. It was nice to see Admiral Nakamura again and take a break from Admiral Nechayev. Because we got to say our goodbyes to her. We've seen her a bunch of times.
We did. We more times than we need to. Yeah. So Picard, you need to head to the Devron system and see what's going on over there. You can send probes and long range scans, but do not cross into Romulan space unless provoked by the Romulans. And then it's like, boom, future. And Picard's like, this is not my time. And I was thinking, Picard's like, I'm not supposed to be here. And I was like, Picard, neither am I. This is starting to get really tiring to be like past, present, future, past, future, present.
Yeah.
It's like,
also like Chateau Picard is just like, I don't have a lot of fond memories of it from this show. Because the one and only time we've seen it before was in the episode Family, which was like so stupid. So I'm like, could we just have him like anywhere else but on the like in the vineyard?
In a cantina or something. Like literally anything.
The cantina. Oh, okay. Yeah, at least in a cantina, there'd be something interesting going on. But he's literally walking through a vineyard with a bucket. I'm like, okay. Well, anywho, so he starts yelling at Geordi that he's in the wrong time. And the way he's doing it sounds like, and someone who has dementia or some other condition where you are disoriented. You can't tell past from present from future. In this case, he can tell, but no one else can tell. But everything he's saying sounds so crazy, and he's not able to articulate himself when he's the future captain. Like he cannot articulate himself well at all, like he can in the present and in the past. So he's yelling at Geordi like, "I don't belong here. This isn't right." And Geordi's just like, "Okay. When was the last time you saw your doctor? Let's just go see." And he's like, which just makes him more angry, right? So he's like, "All right." And so Picard's like, "I want to see Data. Data will understand. He will understand." And Geordi, to his credit, is like, "Okay. All right, let's go see Data," instead of being like, we're going to see your doctor first and then we're going to go see Data. He's like, all right, whatever you say. So he takes him to go see Data. We see the little, the peanut gallery kind of show up again, and they just kind of show up throughout the thing. So next thing you know, we're in Data's residence, which I wrote in my notes. I was like, oh, Baker Street.
100%.
And they were like, no, it's his residence. I was like, does he live in Baker Street?
He's in Cambridge University. He's got cats everywhere.
Yeah.
Sir Isaac Newton lived there, so it is definitely 221B Baker Street from all the Sherlock programs. He's got a housekeeper who's not Mrs. Hudson, it's Jessel. And they're kind of chatting, and he's got this like gray streak in his hair because he's like, I've learned that like people sort of feel uncomfortable if you never age, so I did this to age myself. And I was like, yeah, I also get why nobody else likes it, because he does kind of look like a skunk, but whatever.
I love it. That's just like my streak. So I was like, I love it. I was like, I love it, Data.
Cool red
you rock
streak.
It.
Yeah, you have a really, really cool red streak in your hair. He's got like what somebody's clearly put like a couple of like manila envelopes like around his head and then just spray painted some like gray, where I was like, But he does tell Jessel, he's like, clear my schedule, have so-and-so take all of my lectures for the next couple days. Actually, for the next week, we're getting to the bottom of this. And I was like, yes, this was the saving grace for me in future scenes. Right. Well, how I get triggered when you're trying to say something and nobody's listening, right? Yes. Like, that's why I hate those episodes when like one person is like, but it's happening, and everybody's like, oh, okay, let's get you to bed. It's like, why don't you just listen to them? However, I also recognize everybody else is in the position too, knowing like Picard is not as sharp as he used to be. He has this Ironic syndrome. He's not articulating himself well, and he's not able to explain himself as clearly as like past Picard or present Picard can. So they're also in a bind because they're like, well, you're just kind of acting like old and senile. Like, what do you want us to do? But also I'm like, is this the first time he's acted senile? Because you guys are acting like he's just been senile for the last 10 years. And it's like, here's just another episode of his like senility. It's like, no, he's really trying to tell you guys something. And he's right. Okay. It's like the quantum filament thing. It's like, well, I can't see it, but it's still there. Like, I hate the future scenes because nobody listens to him until they finally do, like at minute like 86 or whatever. And then I'm like,
I feel like everybody listens to him in the future. They just listen to him more like haltingly because of the Ironic syndrome. Like, I guess you're right. In the past, they're like, they don't want to listen to him either in the past because he seems so erratic and crazy. But because he's the boss, they're just like, okay. And then in the present, they just do everything he says because they completely trust him. In the future, they do everything he says, but they do it with looking at each other first. Okay. Like they really don't know that all of this isn't a figment of his imagination. And Beverly even says at one point, if this was anyone else but you, we wouldn't listen at all. So that's basically the only reason they're listening is because of the past credit and credibility he has that he's built up over the past like 30 years. That's the only reason they're listening to him at all. And they do listen, but it's like he's got to definitely do a lot more convincing, which is hard because he's inarticulate. So they kind of are all just basically humoring him because they feel obligated more so than they really believe him. I mean, Data seems to really believe him, but everyone else is kind of humoring him. They're like, okay, sure, let's go, So Data's like, I'm on it. Let's get to the bottom of it. He's excited. He's into it. Now we're back in the past and we're in the shuttle bay and Tasha is welcoming Picard onto the ship. We've got the whole bridge crew there. We've got Worf with his little bob haircut. We've got Troy with her space cheerleader hair. We've got the old out uniforms.
The scants are back. And they are like a rash. They're just everywhere. They're all over the place. They are everywhere. I know the show, they all tried their very best, but it was weird to me to see Troy in the scant because one, they tried to do her hair the way it was in the pilot, but they completely underestimated how goddamn frizzy they made her hair in the pilot. Like, it was like a smoothed down, glowed up, updated version of the Space Cheerleader. But I was like, no, her hair was frizzy and damaged as fuck. Like, so goddamn damaged in season 1. Like, you didn't quite do it. Plus, also, Troy is 7 years older now. Like, right? So it's like the actress is 7 years older. So it was close, but not quite all the way right. But still, they tried. The only people that are missing are Beverly and Riker because they haven't picked them up at Farpoint Station yet. And I think it was smart to write it that way because you cannot babyface Riker again. You just can't do it.
I know, without getting rid of his beard, which he wouldn't do.
Absolutely not. Absolutely don't touch that beard. Don't step away with those clippers. So they kind of worked a way around later in the episode where they used some stock footage from the Arsenal of Freedom where he was a babyface. Where they're like, we got a mission.
I don't think that was Arsenal of Freedom. I think that was actually from Encounter at Farpoint. That was the scene where he met Data in the holodeck or wherever they were. So? Yeah, when he was like whistling and then Data's like, amazing how you humans do that. Like that was the scene from the first episode. So I thought that was genius because I was like, this is exactly what he looked like. This is exactly what was going on.
It's video of him from that episode.
Yeah, and they did a lot.
Arsenal of Freedom because of all the jungle behind him. Where I was like, this looks like Arsenal of Freedom, but okay, maybe it's not.
Yeah, it was a holodeck scene. They were in the jungle, and that's when he was like, awesome. "What is this?" And he was like, "It's the holodeck, sir." And he was like, "What?" Yeah,
gotcha.
As Picard's going to give his speech, he starts to see the peanut gallery again pop up all over the place, and he totally freaks out, and he calls a red alert, and he's like, all hands to battle stations, and everyone's like, sir, because he didn't even finish his speech. He didn't even get through like, thank you ladies and gentlemen for coming. Like he didn't even get through that. And so everyone's looking around all confused, and then Tasha Yar is like, you heard him, move. And then everyone jumps to attention and starts scattering to go to their battle stations because we're at red alert. And this is his first act as captain before he even finishes the whole I'm now the leader, I'm the whole thing. He hasn't even finished that. So you're like, what the heck is going on? And my thought in this scene was like, if I was on that crew, I'd be like, oh man, we got a madman as our captain. Can I be transferred to another ship? I was so excited.
Right, like we're still on Space Dock at Earth. Like I could just jump off real quick. Like one to beam down. No one will even know.
They're still at the dock. Exactly. I'm gonna be at the dock. You guys I'm gonna catch the next one. The next ship that comes along. I'm gonna catch that one.
Bag at the dock. I'm just gonna go grab it real quick. You go on it without me.
Leave without me. I'll catch up. Yeah. So okay. Next thing you know, we're in the observation lounge.
Right. And Picard, gets feelers from the senior crew. Right. And he asks Troy, like, are you getting any sense of an alien presence that isn't supposed to be there? And this is a common thread throughout the episode because he suspects, like, I wonder if this is Q fucking with me, which I mean would make sense. Knowing Q as we know him. But Troy's like, no, I don't. And my question was, it's Q. I don't think Troy could ever sense when he was there, right?
No.
So it's like,
no.
I think maybe at the very least, I remember her maybe being like, we're dealing with something like so much more complicated than we've ever dealt with before, or something like that. But I was like, I don't think you've ever been able to sense Q.
Yeah, what I remember her sensing from Encounter at Farpoint, the first episode, was the space jellies. That's what she sensed. Like she sensed a presence that was very sad and alone or whatever. And then when the space jellies were reunited and floating off into space, she sensed gratitude and joy. Yeah. But I don't totally recall her sensing Q, but Q is Q. Like he can be sensed if he chooses to. He can be standing right next to somebody with his arm around them and they don't notice until they turn around and look at his face, right? So, but whatever, like trying to put Troy to good use with her special Troy abilities, but it does not come through here. And so, and they've scanned everything, nothing's anomalous, and they're kind of like, well, Worf's kind of like, well, it would help if we knew what you wanted us to scan for, sir. Like maybe then we could be a little more specific. And Picard's like, I cannot be more specific. And it's like, okay. And then he's like, he gives some orders accidentally to Worf because he's been giving Worf orders for like 7 straight years or 6 straight years. And Yar stands up and is like, excuse me, sir, but I'm head of security. I should do that unless you want to make some changes. Like she's very professional. Like unless you want to basically fire me and give Worf my job, just let me know now so I can take off this uniform, And Picard's like, absolutely not. No, yes, I meant for you to follow out the orders. And it's just kind of like this moment where it was like, oh, Yar's been gone for so long. Like he didn't even think about giving her an order because he hasn't even been able to see her face for so long.
I know.
So I don't know. That moment was sweet. And also seeing O'Brien was also sweet. It just felt very like the only person missing from this episode was Guinan, basically. Like we just got to see.
I don't know why they didn't have Guinan in the present.
I mean, she would have sensed too much, I feel like. He would have been like, Picard, you're traveling through time or something like that. And you'd be like, no.
Yeah, he would have said, I'm traveling through time. And she would have been like, yes, Q. The trial never ended. Maybe something like, yeah, I guess you're right. Now, as they kind of get to battle stations and get to work, the chief calls Picard to the bridge. And did you notice I had to pause on this? It made me laugh so hard. There are two men coming out of the turbolift carrying like a bin. And they're trotting out this storage bin that we all have in our garage. Okay, when we put away our Christmas decorations.
It wasn't like a future space storage bin,
girl.
It was just IKEA.
It was the most basic $1.99 plastic storage bin, the kind that has like the interlocking lid that you like put it down together, right? And you can stack them all together. You get those puppies at like Home Depot to put all your holiday decorations in. And it was kind of this like gray-green spray painted color. And all they did was took a little Starfleet LCARS label and printed it on a inkjet printer and then just taped it on this bin.
So that bin didn't have Christmas lights. It had LCARS panels inside of that bin.
Yes. It's a picture of what's inside of it. It's at the 22-minute, 49-second mark. If anybody wants to go and look at it, we all have at least one of these storage bins for our holiday decorations, except this one seems to have been like shrunk down by 30%. It was like tiny. But I was like, so why are two men carrying this? Because I can carry the one that's 30% bigger when it's chock full of Christmas shit. But I thought that was hilarious. I was like, hold the phone. Look at this storage bin. And it was literally just had a taped picture of an LCARS display on it. I was like, what is this?
That's great.
I thought it was so great. And we also learn a number of vessels are heading between Federation and Romulan space. So, like this large spatial anomaly has appeared in the Devron system. Starfleet is canceling the mission to Farpoint Station, but Picard ignores that. And the entire crew is like, WTF, buddy. Like, what's going on?
He's like, yeah, veto that. We're going to keep going to Farpoint Station. And they're like, sir, but it's a direct order from Starfleet. He's like, I know, engage. Like I said.
He's not a great captain in the past. He puts him in all sorts of danger, and he's like, no. I was like, did you take a page out of Jericho's book? Like, what's
seriously
going
on? No time. Exactly. And I wrote in my notes, well, I guess he does need like Riker et al. Maybe that's why he's going. I didn't realize he was going so he could meet Q at the Space Net. I thought he was going to get the rest of the crew, and I was like, maybe he needs them all together to solve the mystery. Like, you need the whole Scooby-Doo gang. You can't just have one or two to like really unveil that it was the gardener all along. You have to have the whole crew present, including the dog, in order to really get to that point. So, but that's not why. He was going to find Q, which we find out later. So now we're in engineering, and Picard is telling O'Brien exactly how to fix whatever's wrong with the ship because he's got future knowledge. And O'Brien's like, this is not my thing, I don't know how to do any of this. He was on Farpoint Station. Geordi and Beverly were on Farpoint Station with Riker
and Beverly. Oh, I didn't know that Geordi was at Farpoint as well. Okay, but that makes sense. All right, so
it was all three of them. However, Geordi was not the chief engineer until like halfway through season 1 anyways.
You're right.
So there was some.
Oh my god, girl, I
went through
about that.
We went through like 7 engineers before we got to Geordi. So there should have still been not O'Brien doing this job.
I completely forgot that Geordi was like the end. Like, he didn't become chief engineer until
it wasn't until season 2.
Yeah,
the first episode of season 2, and he had gotten a promotion. But
oh my god,
he wasn't even doing like full engineering duties. Like, because him and Worf were kind of just being bounced around for a while. Worf was mostly just being Yar's little mini me, but they were kind of being bounced around for a while before they really found their rhythm in season 2. So anywho, O'Brien's doing it. And then Picard tells him this whole thing about like, I remember that time when whatever he says, some memory with O'Brien. And O'Brien's like, how do you know all this about me? And Picard's like, oh, I read it in your file. And I was like, these files are too detailed.
First of all, you building ships in a bottle as a kid, that was in your personnel file? Come on now.
Why would that be in your personnel file? And if it was in your personnel file, why would Picard read that? You've got 1,000 people on the ship. You need to tell me like, I mean, just from
give me two facts about that guy. Give me 2 facts about that guy right there. The one that just walked by.
What's his grandfather's name? What's his name? Exactly.
You know what? Give me his first name. Just his rank. Just his rank.
Give me his name. Yeah. What did he dream? Yeah. What did he dream to be when he was 6 years old? Yeah. Did he break his knee or did he break his elbow? Like, how do you know? Anyways, so O'Brien's just like, okay,
that's the guy that lit on fire where no one has gone before.
The guy's like, sir,
get back to work. Yeah.
Sir, did you say I was on fire? I'm sorry, what was that, sir?
I got fired?
Nothing.
No, you were on fire. Never mind. Get back to work.
Nothing. It said get back to work, just like I say to you after you catch fire. O'Brien's like, all right, we're going to be burning the midnight oil. And Data's like, that would be inadvisable because if you combust that type of, material, petroleum-based material, the ship would ignite because of space or whatever. And he's like, it's just an expression, sir. And Data's like, an expression of what? And he's like,
I love this moment.
No, like a verbal, just like a turn of phrase, just something we say. And he's like, aha. So it means one is working hard. He's like, yes, that was what it means. And Picard's like, buddy, why don't you come work with me? I could use your help. And O'Brien's just staring at him with his mouth open, like, which I love.
Yes.
Like, what just happened to me?
I love everything about this little micro scene within the engineering scene. I love it. And here's why. It's cemented into my core memory so much that I thought it was a replay of a line that Data said on the pilot episode, we'll be burning the midnight oil. That would be inadvisable. And then I looked it up and I was like, he never actually said that in the pilot. But here's why I thought he did. Because the writers did such an incredible job of making Data be season 1 Data, where he just parses everything down to its molecules, that I was like, look at the growth. It's Brent Spiner playing Data 7 years after he first started playing Data, but he played it as season 1 Data so well that I thought it fucking was season 1 Data.
Yeah. And then
I was like, God, you guys killed it.
We get to see future Data who's so like intuitive and smooth and fluid in his language, in his mannerisms, in the way he moves his body, in his thinking. His thinking is not linear, but it's very like robust. And we get to see a huge progression in him as a person, which is so cool.
It's incredible. I loved it so much. And I think that Picard at this moment, he looks at Data and kind of grins. And I was like, you're overjoyed to see your old friend for the first time. Like, I love that so much. So he's like, Data, come with me. And so then when Data realizes the scope of what they're trying to do, he says, we will be igniting the midnight petroleum. Or he says something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what he says.
You're so Data. I freaking love it. And then bam, we're back in the present. And again, I'm exhausted. Now Riker is there.
In sick bay.
In sick bay with Picard and Beverly. And Beverly's scan shows that in the last 2 minutes, he's accumulated several days worth of memory. So they're like, okay, now we're going to have a briefing because we've got something like
to hold on to.
Quantitatively saying something's going on here. Yeah. So they brief in the observation lounge and Riker points out that the spatial anomaly is actually going on in the Devron system. So Picard's like, I might be able to find more answers in the past. And I like that at least present team believes him and is working with him on this one very quickly.
No qualms.
None at all.
Yep, sounds good.
Past team is like, who the fuck are you and why are you acting crazy? Which makes sense because
we literally just met you.
We just met you and you're acting crazy. Future team is like, we know you, we love you, you're sick, you're senile, you're not articulate,
and
you're acting
absolutely
crazy.
acting crazy.
Yeah, so
and we don't believe you.
Thank God, this episode would have been nigh unwatchable, my friend, if it hadn't been for present team.
Yeah.
To be like, okay, you accumulated several days worth of memories in 1 minute. Obviously something's happening.
Sold.
Battle stations. Go. Yeah. Yeah. And then, when they have this briefing, they're like, all right, we're kind of going to be burning the midnight oil without referencing that scene. And so Riker says, hey, Deanna, it's going to be a really long night. Do you want to have dinner before we get started? And she says, we have plans. And Worf is standing behind her. And Riker is like, oh, right. He kind of gets it and he seems disappointed. And I wrote in all caps, well, what did you expect, William?
Yeah.
You've been sleeping on this for 7 years.
Really?
What did you expect, William?
Really? Like, she's not on layaway. Like, you gotta, yeah. I also
go into cryogenic sleep, buddy.
And wait for you. Well, what I did appreciate though, is that even though he was kind of sad and disappointed, he was like, oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Yes, have a good night. I'll see you in the morning. Like, he very much was like, go and be well. Yes, even though on the inside he was like, but I wanted to be with her. He was on the outside.
But not
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Not enough to actually do anything about it. So I did appreciate
that. But wanted to. Like, get the fuck out of here.
I do appreciate that he was just like, sorry, like, I'll see you in the morning. Like, that's it. He didn't say any more. He didn't make anything awkward for anybody else. He just kind of like held it there. But I also felt like, see, Worf was right. Worf was right to just be like, and this is actually a question that I had for you. Do you think that they should have told Riker that they were in a relationship? And if you do think so, who do you think should have told him? Troy or Worf?
I'm so glad you asked this. I think that they should have told Riker, but not yet. I think it was still like very new for them. It seemed like they were on like their second or third date when they came out of the holodeck at the top of the episode. So I think it's like, let's give it another week or two and see if this is anything, because Riker is such a close and dear friend and such a respected colleague for both of them, that like, let's not go disappointing him and being like, hey, I'm moving on, by the way, if it turns out to be nothing at all. Because I have had a few dates where it's like, wow, this is really cool. And then like 2-3 dates later, you're like, okay, so that's all that was. It was like a flash in the pan. It's not going to be anything. I think if they did realize like, hey, this is going to be something, I think it should be Troy to say something, because they're the ones that have the past. But as Troy, I would say, I want to be really transparent with you on this. Worf, it's very important to him as well. Like, he also wanted to approach you on this, but I decided to take point on this because you and I have a history. That's, I think, how it should have been done. What do you think?
Well, I don't know, because, you know, in the Parallels episode, when Worf was jumping through times, he approached Riker and said, he was going to say, I'm interested in dating Troy, but he never got the courage to say all that. He was just more like, he kind of, if I was ever interested in someone you were interested in, I would definitely have to tell you and definitely get your approval and blah, 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 blah. And Riker's like, are you trying to date my sister? Like,
are you okay, buddy?
Yeah. It's just like, you don't need my approval for anything, which is, is what Riker said. So I don't know the answer to this, but I feel like if I was Riker, I would want to know. And I wouldn't want to find out like this. I wouldn't want it to be like, we have plans, read between the lines. Like, I would rather have them just, one of them either, doesn't matter who, but I would rather like not be kind of blindsided. I mean, because what if he walked in and they're in like 10 forward making out or something? Like, that would be so like, when did that happen? Like, I would just want to know. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but I just would want to know, and I wouldn't want to have to find out in some like surprise way. So I think like just to respect the relationships here, because that is like Worf's best friend, and Troy and Riker always have this friends with benefits situation. I agree with you. Like, I think they should have told him, and I agree that it should have been Troy because they have the long history together. And I think Troy should have been like, hey, just so you know, I'm dating Worf. It's a new thing. I don't know where it's gonna go. Like, I mean, I would have told him like right as soon as I started having feelings for him, I would have been like, yeah, I have feelings for him and I want to explore that. I don't know where it's gonna go, but just letting you know. Boom, that's it. Like, it doesn't matter how serious our relationship is or isn't with Worf. It doesn't matter what happens in the future. Like, just want to let you know, this is the direction I'm going in. So if you see us on a date, like, that's what we're doing. We're on a date, you know?
Yeah. I think that if this episode had started the way it started with them walking out of the holodeck, they were on a date. If Picard and his deep V-neck bathrobe had not interrupted that date, they obviously were going in for a kiss. So I think that they would have kissed. And then I think the next day, Troy should be like, hey, Riker, I just want to talk to you real quick. Like, come have some tea or something. And there's some stuff I want to tell you. And that's it. Like, you're right. It doesn't have to be a big deal. Also, she doesn't really owe him anything because the dude has slept with literally everybody in the galaxy.
She doesn't know him
just out of
anything.
Respect.
Just out of respect. And goodness knows he's never done this. But I'm just saying, like, just because every single woman on the galaxy that he slept with, like, is not on the ship. Yes. It's not her best friend. Like, if he was hooking up with Beverly, I think he would owe her a conversation. Like, if he hooked up with Beverly, he needs to go and be like, hey, just so you know, I'm hooking up with Beverly. Just want to let you know. You know what I mean? Like, because we work together. Like, we're all friends.
You're right. That just changed my mind. In some ways, it's like, I don't owe you anything. But also, it's like, no, you do, though. You do owe him that. Because if you want to remain friends, you do owe him that. You know, owing somebody something usually comes with an if. If you want to remain friends, you do owe me a respectful conversation. If you don't want to remain friends and you don't owe me jack shit, that's fine. Right. So yeah, 100%. I was hoping like after they had this holodeck date, she was going to go and have a chat with him. But you know, then the storyline picked up.
Yeah, they pick up the storyline in the movies, but and like later on. But here, this is all we're gonna get with the Troy Worf Riker love triangle as far as in the present with what's going on between them. And you know what? I'm interested in what our listeners think too. So if you have an opinion on this, if you don't, just ignore this part. But if you do, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Most people do.
Yeah, I don't know. So the question is, should they have told Riker about the relationship? And if so, which one of them should have told Riker? Let us know. Send us an email to info@thetngpodcast.com, or you can find us on Instagram @the TNG Podcast. So now we're on the bridge, and Picard is talking to Riker, and he's like, listen, I keep getting disoriented because, the whole time jumping thing. So if I get disoriented in a critical moment, Riker, please be ready to step in and take command of the ship. Ironically, Riker himself is extremely distracted in this moment and doesn't even hear that. And Picard's like, Riker, hello. And then Riker's like, oh, right. Yes. Take control of ship if you got it. And he's like, I'm actually a little distracted myself. And he's distracted because he just found out that his best friend and his ex are hooking up. Yeah. And he's like, what just happened to me?
Saddened and a little upset. Yeah.
Which is weird because usually they have no emotions about anything. I mean, literally, Wesley got kidnapped. Beverly didn't shed a tear. Like, that girl's fiance got like obliterated in a plasma blast, and she was like, he was such a sweet man. Like, they have no. But here, he's shaken.
I think it's because it's Worf. You're right. Like, if it was Joe Schmo down the corridor, he'd be like, have fun with that. But you're right, because it's Worf. He's like, oh man. Beverly, meanwhile, is looking at Picard all sorts of sad. He goes to his ready room to look over his data pads. So she comes to see him. Yeah, drink his Earl Grey or whatever. So she comes in and she orders some hot milk with nutmeg to help him sleep, which I was like, does that actually work? I don't know. But it sounds lovely, kind of.
That's her Aunt Adele's little recipe that she busted out in season who knows what. Yeah. When he couldn't sleep.
Yeah, you're right. So there's a callback to that. Oh my God, I totally forgot about that. And she is just sad that he has this Irumodic syndrome, or at the very least, he's got this neurological defect that can lead to it. And they hold hands and kiss, and the kiss lasts 1.5 seconds. And I'll tell you what I did. I paused it and just stared at the screen for 5 minutes because I was like, this is what we were supposed to have for the last at least 3 months worth of episodes. And I was like, I am going to give myself what the writers did not give me. So I just watched it for 5 minutes. And then I was like, okay, good. And then just hit play.
Yeah, it was probably the best kiss in TNG. That was actually, no, that's not true, because Masterpiece was really sweet between Troy and that guy who was the perfect guy for her. Oh, especially after her coming off of so many assaults and then meeting a guy who's just the perfect man for her. Oh, okay, that was actually really sweet.
This is he. Yeah.
This is going to be my second sweetest. I was going to say her with the Trill, but that was not sweet. That was just passion, hot fire. The two of them were very passionate, but this was just very sweet.
I think this was the best one because it's two characters that we have wanted to be together for a long time. Yeah. And they were like, we could be together, but then attached happened. And now we know too much and we're going to hide from our feelings or some stupid stuff like that. It's like, you guys suck. Yeah. You guys suck. And by you guys, I mean the writers, because they would have been great together. Yeah. They're all about their duty and they're serving the ship. Why are you tearing us apart like that? Okay. But then bam, it's the future. Picard tells Geordi,
beautiful kiss.
I know. Picard tells Geordi, we have to get to the neutral zone now. And Geordi doesn't totally believe Picard.
And Geordi's but Data just got the machine and equipment ready for all the tests he was going to run on your brain. We
no
just
time.
did that.
No
exactly.
Time.
He's like, we need to leave immediately. Get a ship. Get a ship? From where? Yeah. Where are we picking up? We just going to the shipyard, just picking up whatever's there?
Yeah, we're going to Utopia Planitia just to grab ships.
Picard is being extremely unreasonable. And he's like, we need to get to the neutral zone. We need to get there immediately. I don't care what happens. But he's like, because there's a spatial anomaly and it's in 2 other time periods. And so we have to go to the anomaly. And Geordi's like, what are you talking about? What anomaly? What is going on? And again, reluctantly, Geordi's like, okay, I will take you to the neutral zone, but you have to remember this. This is important. There is no neutral zone anymore. That doesn't exist. And he's like, oh, right. The Klingons have totally taken over Romulan space. You're like,
yeah.
What?
Yeah,
that's a bum moment stuff. Right there.
Yep.
And then he follows up with, and they're not fans of Starfleet at the moment. So I thought Klingons were a part of Starfleet, but I guess they were just allies. They're not a part of it. They just weren't at war at some points in time. But now they are going to be. I don't really know. So I was just like, okay, because I know they were at war in TOS, but they weren't in TNG. But I don't know.
I think it's definitely the writer's way to be like, look how much time has changed, right? It's like everything is upside down now. The Romulans and the Klingons are like allies, sort of, and they're all against the Federation. So yeah, finally Geordi's like, fine, I guess we can go, but like the neutral zone doesn't exist anymore. Klingons and so they contact Admiral Riker. I am so thankful that Jonathan Frakes does not look like the aged up version of Riker. He looks so much better. Finally got himself out of the commander chair, huh? He doesn't want to help Picard much, though. He seems pretty angsty, and I was like, buddy, you're like 62 years too late for this teenage angst shit. And he doesn't want to help, and he's like, I'm sorry. If I could, I would, and then clicks off.
Well, he wants to help, but he's like, I can't. Like, we can't violate their space. And I'm not going to start a war, so no. But he's like, here's what we will do. I'll contact the Yorktown
about it.
I'll contact the Yorktown. They can do some long range scans. If they find anything, they'll tell you. That's the best we can do. And Picard's having none of this because he's just flying off the handle at literally everyone who doesn't listen to him and obey him immediately. So he's like, come on, Will, that's not the Will I knew. And he's like, all right, talk to you later, buddy. And just hangs up. And so Data's there with Geordi, and so Data's like, well, there's another option. They do allow medical freighters to pass through for aid because, war. So maybe we can like sneak in through a medical freighter. Maybe we could just jump passage or something. And Picard's like, aha, that's going to work because I do have pull with a medical freighter, the USS Pasteur. And so they're like, let's try that, which again,
like I do know the captain. It's like, okay.
Yeah, which I love this too, because Pasteur is the guy who invented pasteurization. So it's another like throwback to a scientist in their ship naming conventions, which I adore. So next thing you know, we're on the Pasteur and all three, Picard, Data, and Geordi walk onto the bridge of Beverly's ship. And it's glorious. It's beautiful. It's futuristic. How do they make it even more future than future? I don't know, but they did.
I know, it totally looks future.
It looks like double future.
Looks future-y. Yeah. The shape of the ship looks stupid as hell to me. I'm sorry. It's
it looked like a sex toy to me.
Yeah, it looks like a dick. I'm just going to say it. Like, it really does. It's like a shaft with like a giant ball at the top.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you guys really...
Like, why did they make her ship look like a dildo? Did we not want to just... We didn't love the flat, or I don't know. Could we have made it a square or a triangle maybe? Could we do a pyramid shape?
Federation ships are like a disc with some nice, it looks like an Enterprise, right?
Right. Like and so they were trying to make it seem
or stretched out. Yeah.
They were trying to make it seem different from that. And it did look different from that.
I will tell you, it reminded me completely of Star Wars, like Rebellion ships that all are like the most poorly designed looking things you've ever seen that are like two huge boxes with like 3 threads connecting the whole thing. And thank God aerodynamics is not a concern in space because that would have been ripped apart the minute you try to like fly it anywhere. Right. So it's like, it looked like a rebel ship that was just like, this cockamamie is like a 2-year-old with Legos put it together. And you're like, what is this? So yeah, the Pasteur looks like a dick. And I was like, cool. But
the inside's amazing.
The inside looked amazing. And thank God we didn't get a whole lot of the exterior shots. But I will tell you later in the episode, it does blow up. And I was like, well, that sounds about right. Like, I will say this, they did an absolutely fantastic job aging up Gates McFadden.
They did. Did you notice they gave her jowls and like neck wrinkles?
They didn't
do the oldening like they did in Too Short a Season, which was a horrible episode.
Yeah.
Where they had to put whole layers of prosthetics over this guy to make him look old. They did just like subtle touches.
Tiny. She looked exactly like she'd aged 25 years. It was so perfect. They did her hair like upswept, but she still had the beautiful bangs. But she looked so perfect.
The highlights were a little more blondie, so they were kind of pushing towards the white.
Yes. And like she had a little bit of like kind of like look like a little scar tissue, like kind of just to the left of her chin, sort of like Harrison Ford has like that natural scar right on his chin. And instead of covering it up in Star Wars, they're like, let's play into this actually. And like, let's lean into it. They did a killer job. And Gates McFadden in real life looks younger now than her old counterpart, but
she
killed it. They killed it.
Yeah.
And they were like,
hers was probably the best oldening makeup that everyone had.
I think Riker's was the worst. Because they just like spray painted his
pretty bad too. Because he just looked haggard and gray.
They just sort of spray painted everybody's hair gray. Like Picard looked great old. He looked like old version of himself, but he had young voice, which I really miss.
He did.
Okay, so Picard in oldened Picard looks good. Gates McFadden looks freaking great. Marina Sirtis is not there because she's dead. Or like Counselor Troy's dead in the future,
which is so sad.
Which is super sad, and we don't know why or how. But like Riker and Worf, yeah, they look awful.
They look bad.
They look really bad. But speaking of Worf, they're like, let's call in Worf. He'll get us in because Klingon space. And they're like, yes, Worf, exactly. Boom, we're in the past. And I'm like, I can't keep up with this.
Yeah, so it turns out like Worf's no longer in the Federation. We find out more about him later, but they're like, Worf can help us because it's Klingon space, so he can give us some kind of in. We're in the past, like the past, and now Picard is looking for the space net, and he's yelling for Q, which again, I was like, this poor crew, not only did they get this Captain Jellicoe version of Picard, but now he's standing on the bridge going, it should be here, Q, come out here. And they're like, sir, who are you talking to? What is going on right now? Like at this point, I'm like, all right, I'm ready for a mutiny. Everybody, can we get show of hands? Hands? Like, granted, we just left the space station like 20 minutes ago. We could just turn this back around and just drop him back off because he is not in his right mind. Where's medical? Like, I get Beverly's not here. Get Dr. Salar. Somebody else.
Let's get Dr. Actually, they were the writers. I don't know why they didn't just put this 2-second line in that Dr. Salar was the chief medical officer before Beverly took over, like when the ship was like set to sail
before she
like
came
for
or whatever
voyage. So I was like, why don't we just get Dr. Salar? Let's be really clear about this. Picard, even on the shuttle, is acting a little sus, but like Tasha is not going to say anything because she doesn't want to lose her job. But like even in the like taking command speech, he's seeing and responding to people who are not there. He's immediately calling for a red alert when there is no present danger. He's completely disregarding a direct order from Starfleet. Like everything is wrong here.
All the illegal.
All of the
And now he's standing on the bridge yelling at Q, which Tasha says, all I know about that is it's a letter in the alphabet.
Yeah,
because
Worf is like, who's Q?
Who's Q? Yeah, and he's like, Q, come out here, Q. And you're like, oh my gosh. And then he's just like, well, forget it. And then he storms off into his ready room and you're like, what? No. This is not the person to be in charge of a freaking flagship.
Is it? Or Data, you're in charge. Right. So he storms
literally
into
anyone else. Literally anyone else.
Yeah.
Instant Gates,
you've got the
you're in charge.
For it. Let's go.
Yeah. The second he walks to his ready room, it turns back into the court that we saw in Farpoint Station. And he's like, aha, it was you all along.
Thank God.
So I guess
otherwise you've been acting crazy as fuck for no reason. Yeah, it was you. And Q goes, it's Judge Q to you. So here we get fine. It's like minute 45. I'm like, can we get a clue, okay,
as to what's going on? Which I guess if this was broken, if this was broken into 2 episodes, this would be the end of episode 1.
Girl, where it would end on I would have been so mad. I would have been so mad to have one whole wasted episode of being like, what's going on?
And then at the end it's just Q. And you're like, but we thought it was Q all along.
No. So Q fills us in. The last time you were here was 7 years ago, which is actually what Picard says. He's like, I was here 7 years ago. And I love that Q goes, stop thinking so linearly about time, which is something Q has said before, which I really love. And Q agrees to answer 10 questions so long as they're yes or no. So here's what we got. Are you putting mankind on trial again? No. Is there any connection between 7 years ago and now? Yes. The spatial anomaly, is it related? Most definitely yes. Is this a Romulan plot? Are they trying to start a war? No and no. Did you create the anomaly? No. Are you responsible for my shifting through time? Yes. And then he says, why? And Q goes, sorry, that's not a yes or no question. You forfeit your question. So the trial has never ended. They never reached a verdict until now. Now they find them guilty of being inferior as a species and will be destroyed. And I was like, well, I don't like that. I don't like that. And back in his ready room, Picard is like, okay, everybody red alert, right? This is at the point where I, as the viewer, had to change tack and just try to watch the episode as a viewer instead of dissecting it all to take notes, because it's so much back and forth. Nothing and everything is happening all at once. And I was like, I can't do notes on all this, which of course I kept doing notes, but like I just tried to watch it as a viewer because it's just way too much. It was way too much.
Yeah. So we find out. So now I'm thinking like, man, why is Q doing this? Why is Q going to destroy humanity? Doesn't he remember how Picard took him in when he became human and like kept him from dying and everything else? But then Q says he's not the one doing it. Picard is actually the one who's going to cause the annihilation of humanity. So you're like, what? This is really confusing. So now we're back in the observation lounge. And Picard's telling the bridge crew what happened. So he's telling them like about Q's accusations. They're all kind of trying to puzzle out what this means and what they should or shouldn't do and how they should or shouldn't move forward. And they kind of come to the realization that we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we should just proceed as we normally would, which is kind of their standard approach to timey-wimey stuff like this. So they're like, all right, let's proceed to the spatial anomaly. Let's just do what we were going to do and see what happens. Back on the bridge, there are several ships that are kind of facing off on either side of the neutral zone. And Picard's like, all right, let's hail one of the Romulan ships so we can have a conversation. And when he hails them and they answer, it's Worf. So again, this is where the time jumping starts going a lot faster. So now we're talking to Worf in the future on Beverly's ship. Worf is no longer a member of the High Council in the Klingon Empire. He's also not a part of Starfleet. He's a governor of some random place. But we learn a couple of things. One is Picard bullies him into coming along on this ride and sneaking them through the neutral zone. So and he uses like honor and duty or whatever to do it. 2, we discover that Federation ships now have cloaks, which yay, y'all should have had cloaks. So that's cool.
And they can go warp 13.
Oh, I missed that.
Girl.
Without turning into lizards? I missed it.
Right. But threshold who, right? Like it's which is of course a reference to the Voyager episode Threshold, where Tom Paris goes past warp 10 and turns into a lizard and then kidnaps.
It's awful. Don't watch it.
Yeah, he kidnaps Captain Janeway and then makes her go warp 10 and turns her into a salamander, and then they end up having salamander babies on some planet. It's the stupidest episode of all time, and I wish I had like one of those Men in Black pens that makes you forget things, like just to But yeah, Beverly's penis-shaped ship is like they can go to the Devron system warp 13. And I was like, hey!
So
warp 13 is cool.
Future, very neat. Okay, so while he's doing this, we go back, so we're just jumping back and forth, and we'll just like kind of tell you what's going on here. Picard is ordering all 3 ships to the Devron system. Whatever ship he's on, let's all go to the Devron system.
Yep.
So at this point in the past, Yar's kind of like, Troy is like, and Troy goes to take Picard aside in the ready room and is just like, the orders you're giving, they're making people feel just a little confused. And Picard's just like, yeah, I'm acting crazy and nobody trusts me, right? And Troy's like, yeah, didn't want to say it like that, but absolutely yes. Absolutely kind of, yes.
Yeah.
And Picard's like, yep, I understand. And I can give no explanations and I will give no explanations and you guys are going to follow my orders. And she's like, alrighty, sounds good. And that's when he like comes over to Riker and is just like, hey, by the way, we're going to be late in picking you up. I can't give you an ETA, but I'll be back to pick the 3 of you up later. And Riker's like, cool. And then Troy's like, all right, I feel like I have to tell you this. Me and Riker do have a past. And Picard has this knowing smile, like, really? Right? And he's just like, well, is it going to affect your duties? And she's like, no. And he's like, yeah, I didn't think it would. So we're good.
Okay, cool.
Sounds good. So then now Picard's talking to the Romulan ship, to Tomalak, and he's like, how about this? How about we each send a ship to investigate the anomaly? You send one ship, I send one ship. All the rest stay on opposite sides of the neutral zone. And Tomalak is like, did Starfleet approve this decision?
Right.
And Picard's like, no, I just made it up right now, bruh. And he's like, I like it already. Let's go. So they both go. Like, we're cool with this decision. Everyone's cool. They go.
I love how casual our review has become. Yeah, no, this is great. You go, I go, let's go, we go.
High five. Like, high five. So they go. They all go. So now all the ships are at the anomaly, past, present, and future.
Yep.
And Picard's kind of jumping back and forth to see what does this anomaly look like? The anomaly, by the way, is beautiful. It's like this glowy space fountain thing.
It's like a nebula that's expanding towards the viewer. That's all white, and it's just like waves, kind of like a flower that's like opening infinitely, like on some sort of drug trip or something. I don't know. Like, it's hard to describe it.
It's beautiful.
Really, really pretty. It's about 200 kilometers across in the present, but in the past it's 400 kilometers across.
And in the future,
million. 200 million kilometers across in the present, and in the past it's 400 million kilometers across in the past. So it's much bigger in the past. It takes up like the entire screen. So we've got some kind of reverse time shit happening.
It's non-existent.
It doesn't even exist there.
So we're like, okay, something happened with this anomaly. And so this is making future Picard seem extra, extra crazy because he's been like, there's an anomaly. We have to get there. There's an anomaly. And he gets there and there's literally no anomaly. And they're like, buddy, we humored you all the way up to this point. And we're like, maybe there's an anomaly. I mean, who knows? Maybe he knows something. And now it's like, yeah, this is not real. So Picard flies off the handle again. And it's just like, it has to be here. It's here. Blah, blah. And so Data's like, all right, maybe we can do some scans. And then it comes to find out it's going to take 14 hours to scan every single inch of this part of space. And so Beverly's like, you know what? Let's give it 6 hours. And then if it's not found by then, we're getting the heck out of here before some Klingon ship comes and blows us out of the sky. So Picard's like, you can't do that, Beverly. You can't leave. You have to stay. You have to find the anomaly. And she's like, in my ready room right now. So he goes in and he's still yelling at her as they go into her ready room. And she turns on him and is just like, don't you ever question my orders on my ship again. And he's like,
you go, Bev.
He's like, I apologize. Yep. I was totally out of line. And I'm like, you gave him a lot of like respect to take him aside to tell him that, because you didn't need to. You could have put him in his place right on that bridge. You could have like without anybody, flinching. You could have absolutely been like, this is my ship and no one gives orders but me. Get off my bridge. And he would have been excuse me, sorry. I'm going to go right back there. Like he would have left, right? So she really did him, I think, a service to pull him aside to have this conversation. And that's where she says, it's only because it's you that we're even here at all. I'm giving you 6 hours because of you. But you do need to kind of keep in mind that maybe this is something that's only in your head. And he's just like, it's okay. And so she like walks away and he's still kind of in his revelry. And then Q appears looking very aged. So maybe this is where they took that idea of making him a homeless man and still kind of brought it to life in this scene.
Yeah, or something. Yeah.
And he's there to give Picard a hint. And the hint,
it's the unhint. It's the anti-hint. I mean, if we're going to start talking about anti-time and shit, it's the anti-hint.
Which I feel like is
it creates panic. It just creates panic and gives
with no help,
no direction or clarity or anything. Right. So yeah, he's like, what you are about to become will always be with you. Thank you, Hallmark, for your card that says nothing.
It wasn't even Hallmark. It was a freaking like fortune cookie.
Yeah.
It wasn't even, it was exactly like a fortune cookie that doesn't give you a fortune. And you're just like, what is the purpose of
what the hell?
You're not delicious and your message is vague.
Yeah.
So it's just like,
and
no
you make
purpose.
And you make a mess. Yeah. So this is
and you're too crunchy for my teeth.
Yeah. So we're in the present all of a sudden. And Picard is like, let's shoot an inverse tachyon pulse to get a picture of the anomaly's interior. And as soon as they start shooting this inverse tachyon pulse, which is a cool sounding name, but also I'm like, why are we inversing everything? It's inverse time, inverse tachyon, but whatever.
Because it's a cool word. Inverse is a cool word. And it's a real word.
Guess.
So it works.
As soon as they start shooting this beam into the anomaly, Geordi's eyes start freaking out. And he's like, oh God. Turns out that what we're looking at in the big picture is a multiphasic temporal convergence of the space-time continuum. Coolest sentence of ever. That says nothing. It's an eruption of anti-time. And if time and anti-time collide, they'll cancel each other out and destroy each other like matter and antimatter. So what's basically happening is time is starting to reverse as time goes forward, right?
Time's at the same time. So it's ripping things apart.
We're not moving in reverse, like in that really cool, like time bubble, Matter of Time episode. But like Geordi's eyes are regrowing. And then Alyssa loses her pregnancy. Because the fetus like Benjamin Buttons, and
which
Beverly
is so sad because you can tell she's like literally about to give birth in 2 weeks. Like she is at the point of getting ready to give birth, which means that even if she had the baby, the same thing would have happened. Like she probably would have lost the baby as a baby, and it's just like, well, this is a dark moment to put into the episode.
I feel like they didn't need to do that. That was so
dark. We didn't need that at all.
No, you didn't need that at all. And like, I'm not a mother. I've never wanted to be a mother. And I was so sad for her. I was like, I can't even imagine anyone who has gone through this experience to be so triggered by something like this.
Right. And I'm not a mother, and I do want to be a mother. And it's just, but I am a daughter and a friend and a sister and a woman. And it's like, come on, writers. We did not need to steal her baby in the like 9th month of her pregnancy, 10th month of her pregnancy, just to like explain that our DNA is like going backwards.
It was Benjamin Buttoning.
It was enough to say that Geordi's eyes are regrowing. That was enough.
Yeah.
Like that made sense to me. But for her to be like, Alyssa lost the baby. And also, by the way, we're probably all going to die. Yeah. The same way the baby did. You're like,
listen, we're all Benjamin Buttoning. If this continues to happen, we're going to Benjamin Button to death. That's all you have to say.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, the only consolation is that because, it's Star Trek. So at the very end, everything is saved at the last second and time is reset. So Alyssa does get her pregnancy, but I was like, I hate that she was going
But does she? Do we know that for sure?
No, but we're just going to assume because we go back to present. moment,
because
right?
So because this never happened. The anomaly never happened.
The anomaly never happened, so she never loses the pregnancy. But I hated that moment. I was like, why?
It was unnecessary trauma. It was unnecessary.
It really was. I didn't like it. And
so we are personally going to remove
I'm
that
sorry.
from our memories. That never happened.
Yeah.
So anyways, Geordi's eyes, that's all that happened.
Yeah.
And moving on, Data's making all these great breakthroughs and having all these great ideas. And Picard's basically taking that and sharing it with the other timelines because future Data is like amazing. And so he's taking it and like sharing it with past Data and with present Data. And so they're all kind of working together to figure out what this anomaly is. And while they're doing that, Beverly's ship starts being attacked by 2 Klingon ships because they're in Klingon space.
Yeah.
And they didn't get the full 6 hours.
They look like Klingon birds of prey in Romulan colors with Romulan cloaking and Romulan technology. And I was like, okay, so this is like cemented that they're like total
They've
allies
really taken
and they're
over
sharing tech.
Well, except that they conquered them. They're not allies. They conquered the Romulans.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Oh,
they conquered.
Are like unconquerable though. I'm gonna come on now. But okay, sure.
I mean, but remember the Romulans were having their own like internal civil war, a la Sarek and whatever was going on there. So maybe they were in a vulnerable place for the Klingons to come and rule the whole thing. I
guess.
But in any case,
they're about to be destroyed. It's like
their warp power's offline. They've got no weapons. They've got no shields because they're a medical freaking freighter. Yeah, they're not a flagship. They're not a warship. They're lucky to have shields and weapons at all. So they're throwing tin cans at these Klingon ships and surprisingly not making a dent. No. And so Beverly's like, Worf, signal our surrender. She's like, we surrender, we give up, and it's like, I don't know if Klingons really take prisoners like that. And so Worf's
really
like,
how
all
this
right,
works, you guys.
Right. So Worf comes over and is like, talk, 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 talk. And they immediately start firing. And it's like, yeah, they don't really do, I quit, I raise my hands, I surrender. They don't do prisoners of war. They don't capture you. They really only have one mode.
So cowardly too, because I'm like, they're very clearly running away and you're shooting them in the back. That is not the Klingon way.
However, their ship is violating Klingon space. And they knew that if they came in, they'd be fired upon. So, and Worf gave them warning before they started this 6-hour scan and said, hey, I'm picking up chatter that they know we're here and that they're dispatching 2 ships to come and find us. And so Beverly's like, okay, well, we'll just keep going. So I kind of feel like that's not on them. That's not on the Klingons to be like firing at an enemy invading ship. And for them to be like, okay, we're sorry, just let us go back. It's like, no, they're not going to go for that. Like, because neither would Starfleet be like, okay, Klingons, you guys can go back. Or okay, Romulans, okay, Cardassians, we know we're winning. You guys can just go back. Like they wouldn't do that either. So, I mean, they wouldn't kill them, but they wouldn't let them go. So in any case, it's very clear that they are about to be destroyed in about 2.5 seconds when suddenly the Enterprise shows up. Admiral Riker has taken command of it, and brought it to the rescue. And beams everyone over because the warp core
heroically
is about
full shot, like going straight up into space. I'm like blasting through these. Yeah, like blows the shit out of some Klingon birds of prey, and in the explosion, like flies through the plasma explosion out the other side. And I was like, yeah, like I was so excited about that, Shereese. I was like,
it was a very cool scene
because you always see people flying through space on the show, like left to right or right to left. But this was like bottom to top of the screen, like pointing up. And it was kind of doing this like Millennium Falcon sort of spiral. I was like, yes. I was so excited by the whole thing.
It was very Star Wars. And and they nailed it. Because usually when I see a show trying to do anything like Star Wars, I'm like, please don't. It's like it's been done and it's been done better.
Reeks of Star Wars.
Yeah. So whatever you're doing is going to be a really cheap imitation and you're going to embarrass yourself. But this actually looked cool. And I would argue that this is going to look cool on any space show.
I was 2 seconds away from being like, Riker. Like I was so jazzed about the whole thing. And I love that on screen. He's like, something told me you weren't going to let this go, Picard. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can get their attention. I was like the nerdiness. I was like, woo-hoo. Violence! Like I was so excited about the whole thing.
So the other Klingon ship that hasn't been utterly destroyed by 3 shots from the Enterprise turns tail and runs.
Goes right through those wings like a lightsaber, just like right through. I was like, oh my God.
It was like shield
packing?
Yeah.
What are you packing, Enterprise?
Clearly more than that little medical freighter. And so he beats them.
Help us, like limping away and looking like a dick the whole time.
Like, we surrender. Please don't hurt us.
Yeah.
So Riker beams everybody over. They all get the bridge crew beams to the bridge. And Riker sees Worf and they both like give each other side eye, and you're like, what's going on between them? Like they were besties, and now all of a sudden they're not friends, but okay, whatever. And then Riker, and they have some words, and Picard's like, we don't have time for this. That warp core is still about to breach. Back up.
Like any fucking second now.
And Riker's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Go ahead and back up a little bit. And we see the dildo explode in space. And then Picard's like,
okay, I'm sorry. That's my favorite line that you've ever said ever.
Wow, and I've said a lot of lines. That's and it. That's the final t-shirt.
You've said a lot of cool lines too.
Yeah, but nothing quite tops that one, huh?
No, that's it.
That's gonna be my legacy. Well, Pride. Goodbye, Pride. I've got no more. That's it. That was the last bit of it.
I'm a microbiologist, and this is my legacy.
And this is my legacy. Hi, I'm Shereese, and this is my legacy. It's gonna be my TED Talk. Anyways, so Riker's like, all right, now that happened, we need to get out of here. And Picard is like,
sorry, you're like, Pride? Goodbye.
R.I.P. Pride. Picard's like, we can't leave. We have to stay. Humanity's at stake. Q told me it was all my fault. All my fault. And Beverly just hyposprays him from the back. And I was like, yeah, honestly, you had that coming for like many, 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 many days now.
Also, girl, you just got emergency transported off of your ship. Where did you have that hypospray?
She had it since he came on the ship. She's had that in her pocket.
Hovering. Girl, was it kind of like a killer in the movie where it's like behind you the whole time in the house, but you just can't sense that they're there? So she's just like hovering with this hypospray, and the minute he turns around, she like whips it back down. Like,
out of the ship, she was like, computer.
Strongest hypospray you have.
And put 3 more, but just make it appear in my pockets.
Yeah.
In my pockets. So I don't have to go too far.
In pocket. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So she just, she hyposprays him and he is out like a light. And the second he passes out in the future, he wakes up in the present in sick bay. Yep. And, this is when we find out that Nurse Sagawa lost the baby, which is so freaking sad. And we learn that we're all going to die, which is also very sad. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, okay.
Now the stakes are even greater because it's not like humanity is going to end at some point.
Right.
Now
in the future, in some mysterious
we've got
way.
Like a few hours or something.
Yeah, it's like we ourselves are going to die long before humanity all dies. So in the observation lounge, Picard orders, they're just kind of like trying to solve the situation here. So Picard tells Troy, go check with Starbase 23, see if any of them are Benjamin Buttoning. And then he goes to Data and he's like, find a way to collapse the anomaly. And then he turns to Riker and tells him to do something. And then they're all like off to the races. And he's sitting by himself, just like, oh no, woe is me. What am I going to do? And then Q pops up again. I don't know why Q's only showing up when everyone else is gone. Like, he never did that before.
Annoying.
Because
he never gave a shit if anybody could see him or not.
If anything, if he wanted a private word, he would just make everyone else disappear.
Or he'd snap Picard away to somewhere. Like,
or
he'd snap Picard away. Invisible. Yeah.
But this whole thing makes Picard seem even more crazy when it's like he only shows up when no one else is looking. But everybody knows Q and his BS by now, so they believe Q is in charge of all of it.
It's not like Q to get joy out of like this, making people think Picard's crazy when he's not. Like, he doesn't care about things that pedantic.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah. But he does snap Picard to France 3.5 billion years in the past. The anomaly at this point is so large it takes up the entire quadrant of the galaxy.
The entire Alpha Quadrant is just beautiful, glowy space fountain.
Yes, like white nebula space fountain flower. And the further back in time, the larger the anomaly. And he looks at this pool of goo, and Q is like, look. These amino acids in this pool of goo are about to combine to form the very first proteins. And he kind of Q sticks his hand in and sort of pulls it out. And I couldn't help but think, like, what did they use for that?
Well, here's what I thought immediately when I saw the primordial ooze. I was like, oh my gosh, it's the Mucinex from the Skin of Evil episode.
That's what, my God.
And then when Q stuck his hand in, I was like, what are you thinking? That stuff burns uniforms off. Like, it burns fabric. Like, don't touch that with your bare hands. But
no, he doesn't give a shit. I thought about that too.
No, I mean, I thought about John Delancey. I thought about John Delancey. Like, don't touch that. Do you know what it did to that other actor's costume? Like, it melted it off his skin. That's what I was thinking. That's why I was like, don't touch it. But I was like, maybe they got a different material.
I thought they were using hand sanitizer. I was like, maybe it's just a big thing. But hand sanitizer, I don't think
with some like black food coloring or something.
Well, I remember when hand sanitizer first like burst on the scene and everybody was like, cool, put this on your hands and rub it. Like it makes your hands feel cold and it like kills germs. This is really cool. But that was like early 2000s, I feel like. Hand sanitizer wasn't this like super readily available substance like in 1994, but I just kept staring at it because I was like, it's the perfect substance. It's clear so you can see John Delancey's hand. Also, it's thick enough to stick to his hand, but thin enough that like glops of it kind of like blob off, where I was like, I don't know what they used. And I looked through the background info and I couldn't find anything, but I was like, this is really cool. This was a cool substance.
Yeah, I really hope it wasn't the toxic Mucinex, but we know John Delancey's A-okay. So he's fine today with whatever
absolute
in
rock
the
star
world that he touched. But that was supposed to be like the primordial ooze, and when he touches it, he goes, uh-oh, look, it didn't happen. You know, so basically life never started on Earth. And Picard was like, wait a minute, are you saying the anomaly somehow disrupted the beginnings of life on Earth? And Q's kind of like, bingo, but for some reason doesn't just come out and say it. He just like looks at him. And so Picard's like, oh crap.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Picard
so I
puts
did
together. Yeah. Picard puts together that like somehow at some point I created this anomaly, which got so big because anti-time that it goes back in time and just disrupts life to the point where like it doesn't even let those amino acids form.
Right. Because of its whole thing of like pulling apart DNA and Benjamin buttoning. It like, pulls things apart or whatever. The technobabble in this episode was heavy and light. We got the tachyon whatever, which was very cool. But then we get explanations like this where we're like,
yeah, the logic was shaky at best. I was like, no, okay, all right. But yeah, Q goes, oh, nothing happens. And then boom, past data finds that their tachyon pulse is converging with two other tachyon pulses with the same signature. So it's like, oh, wow, it's 3 timelines. And I wrote, wow, at this point, I don't care. But okay, all three tachyon pulses are now happening and they're converging. So now the jumping back and forth is starting to happen really fast, right? Because like the storyline is condensing.
But the big idea is we need to stop doing this. We need to, these tachyon beams are what's causing this thing, or maybe making it worse or something. And so we need to stop what we're doing.
Yes.
And fix this anomaly. That's now that's now the goal.
Now we know what we have to do. But before future Picard gets the message, we've got future senior staff like in 10 Forward, and we kind of talk about this drama. Worf and Riker beefed out over Deanna, who has died. We don't know how or when or why. Worf is mad that Riker stood in the way of him and Deanna being together. And I just thought, this is such fabricated drama, though. Like, it's not even worth it. Like, we're at the point of the plot where it's like, now we know what we have to do. There's urgency, right? So,
and now we're taking time apart to talk about this.
That's like, whatever. So
I guess they're just trying to be like, okay, here's what happened, since they never talked about it or something.
Right. But also, you're right.
Like,
I think they don't know what happened.
They could have put this. I mean, I guess they couldn't have put it earlier because we need to get the whole gang back together to hear this, but we could have just maybe not had this.
Yeah, we could have not had this because Geordi, Data, Beverly, and Riker are all sitting and talking, and Worf is sitting with his back turned to them like at the bar. And Riker's like, I never did anything to stand in their way. And Beverly's like, didn't you? But then Riker doesn't even agree to that.
I thought he did. Well, he's like, I did. Because he's like,
I don't think he says he was just like, I just thought there would always be time for us to be together. But then one day she just wasn't there. And it's like, oh, okay.
No, so that's why I think he did admit that he stood in their way, but not in any kind of way like he feels bad about it. More like, because I thought me and Troy would be together. Like, I always thought that's what would happen.
And
so it's not like,
dead.
It's not like I feel bad about what I did to Worf. It's more like I feel bad that I didn't have more time with Troy.
Yeah. Which I'm also like, remember all those years
like
that you
those
wasted
7
with
years?
That? Like, you remember that?
I think you had time.
You know what? We remember. So whatever. Pepperidge Farm remembers too. All right. Now, Picard has woken up from his sedation now with the info about the France amino acid thing. So he rushes over, and of course he's like, guys, we have to go back. Because remember,
so he's in 10 Forward, also in his robe, right? Or no, he's in an outfit this time.
He was in some sort of pajamas, I think.
Yeah, but yeah, he rushes over.
He's in his jamaroos. He was having himself a movie watch party, and it came to him, and he struck out for 10 Forward. And here's kind of the dichotomy of what's going on. He now understands that they have to go back and like terminate the tachyon beam.
They have to fix the anomaly and stop these tachyon beams from happening.
Yes.
In all the time frames.
The future hasn't even started their tachyon beam, but there's 3 of them. But whatever. Okay, whatever. But he is trying to explain all this. And of course, everybody's like, aromatic syndrome. What are you doing out of bed? We already hyposprayed you.
Beverly's standing behind him with her hypospray ready.
Taking it out of her pocket real slick like, right? And then finally, Data is like, wait a minute. Okay, I think what he's trying to say is the thing
Thank
that
God
can just
for
explain
Data.
to us.
Data untangles all of the nonsense that's coming out of Picard's mouth. He
Because
has no emotional stakes in it. Yeah, he's not like, oh, aromatic syndrome. He's just like, yeah, this tracks to me. Like, I can see how this could be true.
I think I know what you're trying to say.
And so that's when everybody gets
you know
what he's trying to say? And he does.
And it's Timmy's fallen down the well. So they're like, all right, fine. Set course for the Devron system, warp 44. So they enter the Devron system and now
they're in the Enterprise. We don't have to worry about 1,000 Klingon ships coming to find us because we're just
not at all. You know what? Actually, as we're flying, just blast photon torpedoes in every direction so that it's just a deterrent anyway. Like we're just blasting into dead space, but just blast as you go. So they get there and the baby anomaly has started, but it's only 6 hours old. So I love that Picard, who's been trying to tell them this whole time, is validated where they're like, shit, he's right. Like, okay. So Picard's like, okay, we need to shut all the beams down. Next time I'm in every time span, that's what I'm going to do. And so he does. It's like boom, 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 future, past, present.
Which is
shut it down. Yeah. So they shut it all down. So he gets back to the future.
They shut it all down and it doesn't do anything. And they're like, ruh-roh.
Yes. He gets through all of the timelines in like 2 seconds and he's like, shut it all down. So somehow Data, and again, how the science is shaky. Doesn't matter who. The only way to close it down is to create a static warp shell to separate time and anti-time. So we got to fly the ships in there and create the static warp shell with our shields. And then we all have to go in because, you know, it's a
because all 3 of us caused this. So all 3 of us have to collapse
and the
it in our
is
timelines.
Like so big. We all have to work together. So they all go in and sensors pick each other up. So it's kind of cool to see the 3 ships all together.
That's really cool because they do open up the view screens and they're like, hey, it's the Enterprise 3 times, which is so cool. And I also thought, is Picard in all 3? Because like we've established his body doesn't move, just like his
like the parallels thing.
Mind memories move or something. So I was like, okay, since he's jumping back and forth so fast, is he actually occupying all 3 ships at the same time? That's so interesting, which I feel like he was. They fly into the anomaly. Before they fly in, when he tries to get the past ship is the only one that's really like against this whole plan.
We're done following your ridiculous orders.
And again, I wrote in my notes, yeah, guys, it's time to mutiny. Are you ready? Are we ready? Like, we know as the viewers, you got to do this to save humanity or whatever. But these people have just met this guy an hour ago. And so far, he's done nothing but super sus behavior. And now he goes, fly us into the middle of the anomaly. To which they reply, wait a minute, Captain. We could die, like that could injure the ship. And he goes, oh yeah, it could more than injure the ship. It could kill us all. But trust me, just trust me, because I know the kind of people you guys are gonna be.
Yeah.
This speech, let me tell you, this is like the first time in all of TNG when I didn't even bother to listen to Picard's speech. And I usually love his speeches. He gives such great rousing speeches. But this time I was like, I don't care what you say. Whatever you say is ridiculous because you guys should not fly this ship into this deadly, lethal situation. And then at the end of his speech, he has the nerve to say, it's time to take a leap of faith. Man, if you don't leap on your own, you have to take a shuttlecraft and try to make a static shuttlecraft
leap of faith. Yeah,
figure that out on your own, buddy.
His speech was also very much out of Jericho's playbook where he's like, I know this sounds crazy, just trust me. But it's like, Picard has never done that. I know this sounds crazy, but trust me.
And
he's
also,
usually like, hey, there's some factors at play. I can't describe it right now, but I promise if I will answer all the questions I can, but just not right this second. But Jericho was like, doesn't matter. I know it sounds crazy. Just do it. Right. And it's like, that's
and there's also there's no trust for him to pull on because they just met him. So this makes no sense, but they're all like, yes, Captain, I'm roused by that speech. Let's go in.
Because I'm the Federation, so we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. All right, whatever. Yeah, I just signed up for. I just got out of the academy like 45 days ago. Like this is ridiculous.
This is my first station, my first appointment.
So they all go in. Obviously, they all go in. You can see all the ships. It's pretty cool. Future past ship is the first to explode. And then present ship explodes, and future ship because, you know, I guess it's the most future-y and powerful. And the anomaly is also at its smallest. It's falling apart. It's falling apart. It's falling apart. And then Q shows up. So Q kind of leans his head forward and he goes, "Goodbye, Jean-Luc. You had such potential, but then all good things must come to an end." And the anomaly like condenses down on the ship, and then you just see white, like an explosion.
Mm-hmm.
And
that was cool. I like that.
That was cool. It kind of all like,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, it like imploded. It was a really visually, it was very cool.
It was very, very cool. And the next thing we see is Picard with his hands holding his head in his lap. He's in the courtroom face down. It's just him and Q. All the peanut gallery are gone. Thank God. They were so annoying.
Yeah, they were annoying at all times.
Bing, bing.
So I was very glad to not have them in this final scene because they would have been such a nonsensical distraction.
Yeah, just stupid. So it's just Q and Picard, which is how it should have been at the start. And Q is taking off his gloves. Like things are clearly like after hours here. It's over. It worked. He saved humanity once again. And the thing that caused Q and the Continuum to be like, we didn't think you could do it, but I guess in the last second, the thing that caused the Continuum to decide that they weren't inferior and were worthy of existing was that Picard was open to the idea of this time paradox and charting the unknown possibilities of existence. And I was like, that was it. That was the moment that Picard as a human grew so much. Like that was the big moment of human growth. Like we've gone through quantum filaments and anomalies where time like doubles and triples on itself.
We've gone through sentient sand and sentient killer snowflakes. We've seen cyborg people wanting to be androids and androids wanting to be cyborgs. Yes. We've done time loops on time loops on time loops. Mm-hmm. We've done technology that can erase your brain and put a whole new person in the ship who you think is a second in command and everybody believes it. We've
done everything.
Mind in a lot of different spaces.
Yeah, this was like this. Okay, I'm gonna be really generous and say like that was a cool conclusion to come to. But when the stake of all of humanity is on the line, cool isn't going to cut it. Like that was such an underwhelming moment to be like, this Picard was your big moment of human growth. Okay, all right.
But I also feel like it was kind of perfect because I can't think of anything he could have said that would have been better than this.
Well, there wasn't anything he could have said, but they also shouldn't have written the episode like this, where it's like, you guys wrote yourself into a box that was like, the only answer is a kind of a stupid one. It's like, really? Okay.
They did kind of paint themselves into a corner when they pulled in Q and then humanity's still on trial like that.
And then reverse time. And then you're all going to die. Time.
Yeah.
They painted themselves into a corner. And I was like, wow, you guys probably should have skipped a week and gone back to the drawing board and tried this. The bones of the episode was cool, but everything that they filled in was really dumb and underwhelming and overwhelming for all of its like frivolity, in my opinion. But they snap back. So he's like, okay, I'm going to snap you back. So he's back in his deep V-neck bathrobe. He's like, what year is it? Is it Christmas Day? And Worf and Deanna are about to kiss and they give them the star date and he goes, oh, whew, okay, all is well, all is well. And they're like, Captain, are you good? And he's like, yep, I just really need some rest, which I was like, based on that nightgown, yes, you do. Go back to bed. So he gets back.
Yeah, and he hasn't slept in this whole saga because apparently every time whenever he goes unconscious, he just wakes up in another reality. So he really does need like a nap. He does.
He needs like a snack and a nap for sure.
So he goes to do that. And then we end our final scene with a poker game, which is so great and so fitting because we love the poker game scenes. Love that. So as they're kind of like, doing their game and setting it up, we do have a little bit of like a monologue, like a voiceover where Picard's like, well, I'm the only one who remembers anything that happened. Nobody else remembers all the future and stuff. And you're like, well, that kind of makes sense because Q was sending you through time back and forth, but nobody else. And then when the anomaly no longer existed, it just kind of rewound back to you being in your deep V-neck bathrobe.
Yeah, time like looped and snipped itself where it's like this never even happened in the first place.
There's nothing for anyone else to remember. But as they're kind of setting out the chips and dip and whatnot in the poker game, Geordi's like, it's so interesting that Picard like told us everything. Like Beverly's like, yeah, I just got done reading his report. And I was like, oh, he actually wrote, I guess this is just so Starfleet. You actually wrote a report about some future thing that no one even remembers and you don't even have to report it. But he told everybody what happened. And Geordi's like, what about polluting the timeline? Like, shouldn't we not know about the future parts? Shouldn't he only told us about like the present and the past or whatever? And then they're like, well, maybe he told us that because like Data says well, but because the anomaly never happened, that future never happened. So we have a new future now. So I don't think it really pollutes anything because it doesn't necessarily affect us. And Riker's kind of like, yeah, and now we can make some different decisions. And there's a meaningful look at Worf, and Worf is like, yes, we will. Like, let's be friends. Let's not argue about Troy.
Which I was like, that's kind of cute. Okay.
It was kind of cute. Like, I like them being friends. So I was like, this is better than them being adversarial, which was annoying. And then at that moment, Troy walks in and like joins the game and pulls up a chair, and they're like, cool, all right. Data starts to shuffle and stuff. And then Picard walks in, and you just hear the music stop and everyone put their red cups down. Like,
and this is where I stopped taking notes. I put my computer down and I just watched. Yeah. This is the scene that gets me every single time. I don't like this episode. Good. Gets me every time, where they're like, is everything all right? And Picard goes, no, I was actually just wondering if I could play, like if there's room. And I love that Beverly and Troy kind of go, whew, like there's not a problem, and they kind of look at each other like, oh my God, he's coming to play. And he sits down to play. They make some room for him.
Riker jumps up so fast. Right, he's like, sir, you can have my seat, sir.
Right here. Yeah.
Data's like, you can deal. I was like, okay. Yes, everyone's like just welcoming him. It's really sweet.
Yeah. And Picard gets the deck, Data says you can deal. And he goes, oh, okay. And starts shuffling.
And he's like, I used to be really good at this. And you're like, you know what? That actually makes sense because all of them are playing now. They're going to be really good poker players when they're captains. Yeah. Or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. And also his like whole gambling past and the, in the academy with the Nausicaans and all that. I'm like, yeah, I totally could bet that you were pretty good card sharp. And Picard looks around and he goes, I should have done this a long time ago. And Troy's line, and I feel like I'm going to start crying now. She says it in the most perfect way. It's not overly saccharine. It's not fairy tale ending, but she goes, you were always welcome. And then they start playing. And it's this overhead shot that starts to pan up from the cards being dealt. And I love that everybody's got like 6 chips and Riker has like 250. He's so good. And then the ship just sails off into a nebula, and it's the most perfect like final shot that, and even,
the part with Riker having 100 600 chips is like when that scene first started, somebody, I think it was Beverly, was like, how are you so good at this? And Riker goes, oh, I cheat. And Data looks at him like, oh my gosh, are you like so
and Worf is like, what?
And Riker's like, I'm kidding. It's just like, even just that, like that camaraderie, the joking, like the fellowship is really beautiful. Yeah. So the pans out and it's like the Enterprise goes off into space to do its adventures. It doesn't feel like the end to me. It just feels like the end of the day. And tomorrow a new adventure starts. Which
the end of a day, but the end of a big day. Like I love that Picard made the choice to tell them everything, because he could have been like, I've been snapped back into right the second I was where I left. So like nobody needs to be the wiser about this. But I love his trust and faith in his friends, that he's like, guys, this is what happened. And they're not going to think I'm crazy. Because I guess at the very least you could do a scan and Beverly could be like, oh yeah, you've made like, a month's worth of memories in like 5 seconds. So I guess what you're saying is true. But they don't even need to do that. Like, I love that it was his choice to tell them that. Like, it's the end of a big day. It's like a day that like all's well that ends well, right? Like you're on the freeway, you get home safe, but in the meantime, like a car was sideswiped right in front of you. So like you were really close to something really bad happening, but you didn't, and you were okay. So you go home with that like renewed sense of like, thank God, I love it so much. It makes me so happy to be like, bum, bum, bum. They're just like continuing their day, but like a big day.
Yeah. It was the perfect ending. I thought it was perfect. I felt really satisfied. I mean, the Q storyline I thought was stupid, but I do think they tied it up the best that they possibly could by opening that particular Pandora's box in the first place. I think they closed it as best they could. But with this, and I'm glad that it ended with this scene, because had it ended with Q, that taste in my mouth would have been like, what? I'm confused. I'm still confused.
Yeah.
But because they said,
like,
okay,
now
we're going to wrap that up, and let's end on the crew.
Let's end on the poker.
The poker game was the perfect ending, because with this ending, I felt really satisfied. I didn't feel like I need to, where are they now? I need to know what happens in the next episode. It didn't feel like a cliffhanger. It didn't feel like, I'm still hungry for more. It felt like closure, but that good, healthy closure where know that things moving on from here will be positive and good. As long as they go on, that's all I need to hear. And then lucky for us, we get a million movies and we get Picard and we get spinoffs. And so we now looking, many, many, many decades back can be like, oh yeah, this didn't end at all. Like this is still going right now. We have like 7 more spinoffs. Like this is not going anywhere. And in my notes for my final thoughts, I put the end scene was everything, which I already mentioned. And I also wrote that this episode was really cathartic. It referenced history and it referenced the future, which I think adds to the feeling like the ship goes on because we got to see a potential future. So anyways, what are your final thoughts?
I have so many final thoughts, and so many of them echo what you've just said. Yes, there was a great deal of catharsis in this episode because we got to see Tasha again, like Tasha lives. We got a future we didn't want to see with like Beverly and Picard being like married and divorced before anything even happened. And it's like, what the F? Like we really wanted to see that, but okay, whatever.
Such a ripoff.
I will get off that horse like I've eaten to death. But also you're right. Like we also get to see some mistakes in the future that now knowing what we know, Riker and Worf like are like together kind of like silently sort of making a pledge to not let this happen, I kind of wanted to see, and there was no time for it, but I kind of wanted to see a second where Troy's like, excuse me, hold up. I'm where in the future? I'm dead. What do you mean? Hold on.
For her to be like, oh, well, you've told us all about like Worf and like Data in the future. What about me? Where am I?
Yeah. And he's like,
so what happened was,
like, wow, did I go off on assignment? Well, a sort of assignment, it's like, I kind of wanted to see. But yeah, the end scene is everything. I don't like the story because of how scattered it felt. Yeah. I don't like that it took so long for us to get like an idea,
to know
like,
what was going on,
to know what the hell was going on. Yeah, like you and I know,
minutes.
we know what's happening because we've seen it before. But for a first-time viewer, it's like, somebody tell me what the F is going on. This is really frustrating. I will also say this on a personal note. I apologize if my review has been bitchier and cattier than normal. I've been really ill, and I'm like, my body is just sort of repairing itself, and it was a very serious illness. So like mentally, I'm kind of repairing myself as well. And today was a tough day in like trying to recover. So I definitely felt more like less inclined to like tolerate anything I didn't want to tolerate, where I'm like, F all of this. Right. So I hope that listeners are not like, man, Andrea was really off her form today. And also like, why are you being so mean? So that might explain why. The episode in general, I don't like, but there were moments, like you said, that were amazing. And I really wish they hadn't done the Alyssa loses the baby thing. That was so unnecessary. But that end scene is wonderful. Every time I watch the end scene, including today, I cry. And knowing that they go on and do movies and do all that. And also I kind of like knowing that in this timeline, they go on and Worf and Deanna are going to date. But we also know in the movies, like the very next movie that comes out, I think, like Riker and Deanna are getting married. So it's like, okay, so we get like the relationship we had hoped to see, but like in the movies. And I hope that's not a big spoiler because those movies came out like 28 years ago or whatever. So it's like, if you didn't see it, it's kind of like, how dare you spoil Titanic? It's like, but we all know what happens, right? Like, so yeah, but like
it sinks.
Yeah. Shereese, spoiler much? God.
If you don't like sinking ships, definitely give that one a skip.
Not the one. Yeah. I did like that they brought Q back because he was the one that kicked this whole adventure off. So I did like that. Plus, I love Q as a character, and I love John Delancey. So I was like, yay, you're back. But yeah, so I have very like complicated feelings sort of about this episode. I do love that as of this moment, you and I have reviewed, I think, 175 episodes, and we haven't skipped a single one. And I will tell you, listeners, this one was a hard one. Just the note-taking logistically alone. This is how you know we really do this for love of the show and for love of the podcast and for love of our listeners. Because we're like, we're not going to leave our listeners hanging on the very last one, even though this one was a beast to get through.
You know what? I will say this has not been the hardest one. The hardest one, I think, in my recollection is, do you remember that episode with Q and the stupid like the pig people, the pig dog people? So that episode, just so you guys know, because I don't know if we said it back then, we watched that episode, we despised that episode, we reviewed that episode, and then we realized we never hit record. So we reviewed that episode. Yeah, after it was all done. So we reviewed that episode again. We had to go through that dog crap episode
twice.
3 times. We had to watch it the first time. Then we had to talk about it twice. That was like 3 hours on the worst 45 minutes of our TNG television lives. So, I mean, I think that proved more love than like, this is like, we just have to finish. But that wasn't like, not again, not the dog pig people one more time.
I think you're right. And I will say, full disclosure, that was me that forgot to hit record. And then ever since that episode, Shereese was like, I'll just handle the making sure we hit record part. And I was like, thank you so much. But the minute I went to hit unrecord, and then the little recording like hadn't been on the whole time, my face went, oh no. And I didn't even have to say anything. Shereese went, you didn't hit record, did you? And I was like, no. And she went,
where's the end recording button? And I was like, I can't see it on my side. Can you not see it on your side? And you're like, no. And I was like, did you hit the record button to start with? And you're like, no.
Shereese went, you didn't hit record, did you? And I went, no. And I felt like the worst human being in history. And then she just went, that sucks. Okay, we'll just record it tomorrow. Like, we'll try again tomorrow. Because we were like, we are not talking about this back to back. Like, we'll do it tomorrow.
By the way, that was like our 3rd episode we reviewed that day.
Yeah.
So we were so early. We were so early in the recording of the podcast. We should save all this for next week's episode. But yeah, we were so early in the podcast that we didn't know how many we could record in a sitting before we
turns out 2.
Our brains fried. Yeah, it turns out 2. And this is how we learned that, is stuff like this, where we're like, okay, that was too many. So this was already like our 3rd episode we were recording of the day. And then it was like, you know what? Let's just pick this up another time. And I remember, Andrea was like, I feel so bad. And I was like, it could literally happen to anyone. It's just, and
this is why Shereese is the best person to be friends with. Because she's like, it could happen to anyone. It's fine.
Yeah, it absolutely could. And it happens. I think every podcaster has had this happen at least one time in their podcasting life. Like this has happened. Sure. And I said, at least we didn't have a guest, because that would have been, because I hate the back and forth of scheduling like so much. Like I hate it that it's always like Monday, no, Tuesday, no, like I hate that. So I was like, at least it wasn't that, because then we'd have to do that again. Like, so anyways, yeah. So this was a lot to get through. It wasn't our hardest. It also wasn't the most fun.
I would say it was one of my hardest, but it's probably because where I am in my real life, in my day, like being hospitalized for a week and then being only like 4 days out of hospital, and my body is still
and really being
like
2 days at home, like day and a half at home.
Yeah,
like
I stayed with my mom. I stayed with my mom for a few days because like she was scared to death. I was scared to death, right? So there was a lot of stuff, but also, you know, knowing my mom is like Luxana, I was like, okay, it's been 3 days. I got to go home, or I'm gonna like kick the dog. Like I need to go. So yeah. So and I'm still like, my sleep is still not ironed out, which is so critical to like your body's recovery. So I'm giving you guys a lot, but all of that is to say, if I'm extra bitchy and just really not having it, this is why. So, but I am also really thankful to be alive, to be recording this, because there were moments where that might have not been a possibility. So I'm just really, really glad I'm here to talk about this episode. So even if it's not an episode I like, but I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to be here with you, friend, because the alternative is pretty scary. Yeah.
The alternative is really grim. And I'm glad you're here too. I'm glad we're able to do this recording. And I'm glad that this is not our last episode. This is not our last episode of podcasting, but it's also not our last episode of the TNG podcast. We have one more podcast. And that episode's going to be coming out in real time next week on Thursday, like it always does. But if you're listening to this in the future, hey future, hope it's going really good.
Don't get into a fight over Deanna.
Don't do it. Just bury the hatchet and be friends, okay? So our very last episode is going to be our infamous wrap episode, like we do at the end of every season, except for this is going to be a big one, because we're not even going to wrap the season. We're going to wrap the whole show. So we're going to talk about our very most favorite episodes. We're finally going to give you a top 10 list ish of our absolute favorite episodes.
That's actually got 10-ish episodes. It's not going to be like 74.
Right. It's got 10-ish, but it's got 10-ish from both of us. Yeah, it's like a 20-ish or less.
We haven't even discussed our list, and I'm guessing so many of our tops are going to be similar that it's really going to be like 14 or 16.
It will be. It'll be like top 12. Yeah. Like it's going to be a lot of overlap. And we're also going to tell you our least favorite episodes. It'd be kind of fun. You know, if you're listening to this in real time, you should email us or Instagram us your guesses of what our tops are going to be, because I think that'll just be fun. And I'm sure you're going to get some very correct.
Is it Is it Aquiel, girl? Because I feel like it's Aquiel.
We're going to find out. We're going to find out.
Yeah. So, and we've also got a really big announcement about our next project that we're so excited to talk to you guys about. So we're not going anywhere. TNG may be over, but we are not. And, what kind of nerds would we be if we didn't continue something in science fiction? So there's lots of that to come, and we're beyond excited about that.
We will reveal that in the next episode.
Yeah, but it's going to be like an American Idol thing where it's going to take 59 minutes to get to the reveal. No, it won't. Okay, we're not doing that. I promise we're not doing that because I hate that.
But first we have to flash to the future and then the past and then the present and then the future and then the past and then the present. And then Q's going to show up and be like, what's your next podcast? And we're going to be like, open your mind, Q, to understand the depths. Yeah, that's what it's going to be. And then we're all going to play poker.
Yeah. So here's how I'm going to end this week's episode. Obviously, we have our big series wrap next week. But because I like a good loop, I'm going to say next week, guys, we are breaking down season 1, episode 1, Encounter at Farpoint. Thank you so much for nerding out with us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. See you next time.